Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story. A young man is working on a computer. The phone rings. The guy reaches for the device. The guy presses the phone to his cheek and answers the call. The interlocutor calls the young man the author and says that he seems to dislike him. A puzzled expression appears on the guy's face. He gets up from the table. The interlocutor says that if this is true, then the young man should say this honestly, and in this case he will get another editor. The hero asks again in surprise. They ask him if he likes the terms of the contract. The guy screams in fear that he is satisfied with both the terms of the contract and his interlocutor as an editor. The name of the subscriber is visible on the phone screen, namely Gu Mo. This person asks again in surprise, after which he says that for him the guy's words are a great relief. The young man looks at the phone screen. We see the device up close. Streams of purple energy rise around it. Gu Mo says that he still notices a certain oddity. A drop of water runs down the young man's face. The editor asks why nothing changes after their conversations. The young man scratches his head. Gu Mo says that if the author is writing a story about a hunter, he needs to at least do a little research on the subject, and this is a good thing to do when writing any book. The young man spreads his arms out to the side and declares that he has done all the research he needs to do and has learned, for example, that very strong protagonists are incredibly popular these days. A phone hangs in the air in front of the guy. The editor asks if this can really be called a conscientious study of the subject. He asks if it is okay to kill a boss with one blow, especially if it is not a B or C rank. The guy explains that it was necessary to develop and speed up the plot to achieve catharsis. The phone grows huge. Gu Mo asks if the guy really thinks his readers are complete idiots. He states that in order for everything to look believable, the public needs to be given a sensible plot and show its realistic development. You can't just throw the monster's head at the protagonist's feet so that he can show off in public and move on. Then the editor says that this is not the only problem with this author. He mentions the genre he works in, but then suggests finishing for today and states that the remaining comments will be sent by email. Finally, the editor begs the author to write properly. The young man holds the phone in his hands and sighs heavily. The file is sent to the trash. The author understands that he was rejected for publication again. The hero taps the keyboard like a madman. He remembers how smoothly everything went when he first started writing. The young man remembers looking at his laptop, beaming with happiness and calling his father to take a look at his talented son, realizing that at that moment he was closer than ever to creating a real masterpiece. The guy collapses onto the bed, exhausted. The hero, whose back of his head we see, clenches his fist, realizing that he will have to do a lot of work to bring his creation to a divine form. Next to him, someone is reading breaking news. The young man looks up in surprise. In front of him is a TV screen. The announcer reports that an rank monster has appeared in downtown Toronto. The Canadian government and hunters have taken matters into their own hands, but it still seems impossible to eliminate the crisis. Next to the announcer's head, a giant monster is visible. It is reported that, according to the authorities, the situation is unprecedented and the city and its residents will certainly suffer enormous damage. The young man takes hold of the temple of his glasses. The guy looks up. It seems he understands that this is a good opportunity to study the issue. Enormous monsters with helicopters circling above them are running amok in the streets of the city. A green monster reaches out to a rotary wing machine. The helicopter explodes. Winged monsters are flying over the heads of the bipedal monsters. Two machine gunners are firing. Their comrades are explaining to the civilians that they need to evacuate the city immediately. One of the soldiers looks up and asks if reinforcements have arrived yet. The second one shouts that he will check it out. The soldier shouts for his comrade to act faster. A giant leg of the monster descends on the machine gunners. One of them shouts that it is impossible to hold out here any longer. The soldiers scream in horror. One of them closes his eyes. The monster is struck by a powerful electric discharge. The machine gunners look in amazement at the debris flying around them. One of the soldiers looks in amazement at something. A young man is visible in the sky inside a bright yellow sphere. A question is heard as to what the hell this is. The monsters look at the guy hovering above them in fear. He slowly descends from the sky. The boy's eyes are covered with yellow hair. Two monsters rush at the enemy. The young man calmly puts his hand on the forehead of one of them. There is a powerful flash. Black shreds are visible around the monster. The blonde man puts his hand forward. He snaps his fingers. The monster is struck by an incredibly powerful discharge. An explosion occurs. Debris falls on the city. The soldiers look up in amazement. The civilians are also shocked. One of the girls declares that one of the 12 apostles stands before them. The young man puts his hand forward. He looks very menacing. Someone calls him the Thunder Emperor. The people gathered below excitedly raise their hands and call the young man hanging above their heads the Thunder Emperor over and over again. We see the blonde man's head. Now we see his mouth in front of us. The people continue to chant the title just awarded to the young man. The blonde guy, leaving a yellow trail behind him, lands on the roof of the building and mentions realism. In front of us is the leg of a young man. It is reported that in front of us is the legendary hunter Thunder Emperor. The blonde guy looks at his phone. On the screen is a message from the editor Gu Kyungmo, who asks to add realism to the plot at least this time. It is reported that the name of the Thunder Emperor, the owner of incomparable power, sounded throughout the world. The young man wearily lowers his head. He asks why the editor finds the plot unrealistic. In front of the hero sitting on the roof of a skyscraper lie the corpses of huge monsters. The guy declares that he likes everything. The young man wearily says that he really does not understand what is wrong with him. It is reported that at the moment he is the author of stories about hunters published on the internet. The guy, smiling, rubs the back of his head. He says that, it seems, not everyone can be a writer, and that is why he has such a hard time. People look at the portals. The hero remembers that at some point a gate opened on Earth. A child points to a dinosaur crawling out of the portal. It is reported that, without giving the opportunity to adapt to the sudden phenomenon, monsters began to crawl out of the gate. The young man puts his hand out in front of him in fear. He grabs the frightened boy to protect him. The toy dinosaur that the child was holding flies apart. The man who saved the boy closes his eyes in fear. The child puts his hand out and begins to generate blue energy. The child stops the giant monster. The hero remembers that at the same time people appeared who awakened superpowers in themselves, and they began to be called hunters. People calmly ride the escalator. The hero thinks that thanks to the incessant work of the hunters, people began to think that the old world had returned. The young man takes off one of the headphones and looks at the huge black gates. It is reported that a new phenomenon has appeared in the world, the gates of chaos, and this was already a real disaster. The guy runs away. The hero remembers that even large detachments of hunters could not seal such gates. 4 characters stand out among those running away. It is reported that humanity was under threat of destruction. The portal above the heads of people takes on incredible dimensions. In front of us is a group of daredevils ready to join the battle. The hero remembers that at that moment 12 legendary hunters took matters into their own hands. Winged monsters look at the portal from which people are falling. The hero remembers that these hunters sealed the gates of chaos and saved humanity. We see people with various weapons. It is reported that they began to be called 12 apostles. Blue rectangles hang in the air. It is reported that the raid on the gates of chaos was successfully completed. One of the heroes looks at his watch and says that 79 hours, 17 minutes, and 8 seconds have passed since entering the gate. A giant monster lies in front of the hunters. Someone declares that the destruction of the cataclysmic class monster is complete. The girl in the blue suit falls to the ground and says that she can't do it anymore. Her comrade with purple hair declares that everyone tried hard. The girl touches her chin with her index finger and says that the gates of chaos will open again in 100 years, after which she declares that today is probably the last time they will gather together as the 12 apostles. The girl asks if her comrades have thought about what they will do next. The heroes look thoughtfully at the girl who asked the question. There are 3 apostles in front of us. The first of them says that he will go to Hawaii for a well-deserved rest. The young blonde man says that he has 4 videos to shoot, which advertise armor for hunters. The third expresses hope that he will finally have time to take up inventing. The blonde man looks thoughtfully to his left. He is called the Thunder Emperor and asked what he will do now. The young man is sitting on the ground, putting one leg under himself. The bearded old man looks at the guy and says that he does not seem to know yet what he will do. The man sits down next to the blonde and says that choosing to do something is really very difficult. The old man, holding a staff, says that their power is too great to control alone. The man looks over his magic weapon and says that it is enough to make one mistake for something irreparable to happen. The blonde looks at the old man in surprise. The latter says that if the guy does not know what to do, he can join him. The old man holds out his hand and begins to tell about the true path of the hunter. The blonde, rubbing the back of his head, smiles and says that he wants to leave this occupation. The old man, squinting, says that he assumed that the guy would say something like that, but then stops and asks again in surprise. The other apostles look at the interlocutors sitting nearby in surprise. Some of them try to resuscitate the old man, and the young man with blonde hair asks the Thunder Emperor if he was joking. The hero asks why everyone is so shocked and what's wrong with their faces. A guy is sitting on the ground, and his interlocutor asks him what he is going to become if he no longer wants to be a hunter. The hero, whose eyes are hidden from view by his bangs, declares that he is going to take up writing. His comrades look at him like he is an idiot, and the blonde asks him to repeat. The Thunder Emperor looks up with inspiration and declares that he is going to write short stories for the internet. We see the back of a man speaking to an audience, and he declares that he would like to end his speech with a quote from his own book. The long-haired man puts his right hand out to the side and says that before you start writing, you need to imagine that you are telling a story to a person sitting in front of you. The man has an enthusiastic expression, and he advises writing in such a way that the audience never gets bored, and that you need to remember that the most important thing in a web novel is fun. Someone is watching this man's speech on a laptop screen, and the speaker declares that fun is also in second and third place. A young man in glasses quickly writes something down in a notebook. It is reported that the action takes place several months after the sealing of the Gates of Chaos, and in front of us is no longer the Thunder Emperor, but an aspiring writer. The guy cannot recover from the shock. The speech he just heard made a huge impression on him. The young man, smiling, wipes his nose with his finger. He mentally thanks James Patterson and thinks that his head is already full of ideas. The guy begins to think that he can really write a novel. The young man says that he needs to work while the inspiration has not yet died out, but someone's hand slams the laptop shut. Two guys who watch the lecturer's speech with him invite him to have a beer. One of them says that the guy will not work alone. The young man sits at a table. He thinks that tomorrow is his deadline. One of the guys gives him a thumbs up. The hero's friends wave their hands and wish him luck. The guy thinks that despite everything he feels pretty good. Behind him, a loosely closed hatch is visible. The guy understands that this is the feeling of anticipation of creating a masterpiece. A strange creature crawls out of the hatch. The hero tries to remember what James Patterson said. A waitress comes out with a tray. She calls customer number 18. The girl, smiling, says that the rice latte is ready. The hero works with a laptop. He asks to put the drink on the table, thinking at the same time that it would be nice if the waitress also removed the empty glasses. The young man drinks the drink brought to him through a straw. He thinks that he has saved up strength and can now work further. He puts the glass next to the laptop and thinks that at this rate he can make it before the deadline. The young man puts on headphones. We see that classical music is playing in his player. A purple monster is raging behind the young man. The writer thoughtfully looks at the laptop monitor, trying to figure out what to write next. A young man is working with headphones on, so he doesn't hear the monster trying to smash one of its victims against the cafe window. The monster's tentacles rise high into the air. The guy happily thinks that he's almost finished his masterpiece. The monster notices a man sitting in the cafe. The aspiring writer thinks that he only has to finish the last line. The guy is typing on his laptop. It seems to him that he's got the perfect ending. The monster's tentacles rise high into the sky. The hero is getting ready to press the enter key, thinking that he's done it. The monster's tentacle breaks the window. The headphones fly off the young man's head. Both the glass with the drink and the laptop fly into the air. Only the tentacle remains in front of the guy. The young man looks at the broken device. His hands are shaking. The eye of the purple monster is visible behind the grief-stricken guy. The young man covers his face with his hands and starts to cry bitterly. He looks out from behind his fingers and declares that his creation is dead. Powerful lightning bolts appear above the guy's head. The monster's tentacle is a few centimeters from the writer's head. The monster hits the ground. Electric discharges sparkle around the guy. His leg is on the monster, which he calls an octopus, generating streams of electricity with his left hand. The guy looks at the monster and demands that it stand up, since he has not yet fried it. In front of us is an electric discharge. The girl screams in horror. A young man is floating face down in the water. The girl tries to shout to Jason and asks where the lightning struck from. The girl, who is watching TV, hears the heroine asking the dead Jason not to leave her. The viewer says that this is just a wonderful plot, because nowhere else will you see how the main character dies from lightning. The girl happily eats chips. It is reported that in front of us is Tae Iseo, aka Crimson Flame, an S-rank heroine. She says that melodramas are best watched when the scriptwriters do not know the limits of their imagination. A young man with glasses appears next to the girl. The young man makes a remark to the girl for making a complete mess. It is reported that in front of us is a student named Tae Iseo, the youngest of the children in the family. In front of us are 3 images of Tae Iseo. It is reported that she is one of the strongest S-rank hunters in the country. In addition, she is the captain of the 7th squad of the most prestigious guild guardians, and her beauty and great sense of style made her a superstar of colossal magnitude in the world of hunters. We see the host of the city news. Tae Iseo presses the button of the remote control. He thinks that no one will believe that Tae Iseo is next to him. The girl behind his back indignantly asks what the young man is doing at all. She raises her left hand and angrily says that it was a very important scene. The girl asks why the young man decided to ruin her precious day off. The guy asks what other day off are we talking about if his interlocutor is a freelancer who has no orders. He says that if the girl stayed at home, then let her help with the housework, and if she does not want to do this, then let her go outside and or take care of herself. The girl indignantly screams at the young man to just give her the remote control and calls him a damn whiner. Someone's phone makes a characteristic sound. Iseo and Ijun look at the device in surprise. In front of us is a smartphone screen. It says that in the Mapo district, the gates spontaneously opened. The message also contains a request to move to the nearest shelter and not to leave the premises. The young man repeats the name of the district in surprise. A message sounds that the district has been assigned the status of a red zone, so all citizens are asked not to leave their homes, and those who are outside are urged to immediately find shelter. The girl gets up from the couch and says that she is leaving. The young man asks if she was called. Tae Iseo takes off her glasses and says that no one called her. The girl looks thoughtfully to her right and says that, in her opinion, it would be better if she went. Ijun, smiling, looks at the girl and says that she looks much cooler in work mode. The young man holds a laundry basket in his hands. He says that Iseo is not obliged to go anywhere. She asks why he thinks so. The guy answers that someone has already gone there, namely their unemployed brother. We see the back of the hero's head. Ijun calls him a failed writer. The hero looks very unhappy. He sighs heavily. In front of him lies a destroyed laptop. The guy says that even the hard drive is completely destroyed. The young man sits on the monster and complains about his fate. The hero, almost crying, looks at the broken laptop and mourns his debut work. It seems to him that today everything could have worked out for him. The guy imagines himself receiving praise from the editor and some kind of prize, and then performing on stage. He thinks that he should have made a splash with his first novel and debuted as a super newbie. He could have immediately become a famous writer, received an award for the web novel of the year, and then started giving lectures and approached his golden years with a clear conscience. The young man is shaking with anger. He raises his fists and spews powerful electric discharges around himself. The hero shouts that a couple of fried octopuses will definitely not be enough for him now. The hero's mouth is twisted into a terrible grimace. He declares that since they forced him, they will get it from him in full, and the monsters definitely messed with the wrong person. Black streams are visible between the skyscrapers. The young man asks where the boss is, and then immediately notices his opponent. Electric discharges begin to sparkle above the city streets. The young man promises to deal with the enemy. Helicopters fly over the dead monsters. A representative of the first squad reports that the monsters in this place have been destroyed. Armed people are visible next to the purple tentacles. One of them says that civilians have also been evacuated, and they continue to hunt the remaining monsters. A fighter hears on the radio that it is too early to relax. One of the soldiers asks another how much longer they have left. He replies that they need to hold out for a very short time. A fighter who is squatting in front of the killed monsters says that for a spontaneous gate, everything turned out surprisingly easy. His comrade says that all this is thanks to the incredible strength of their captain. In front of us is a guy in a white t-shirt. Someone says that no one expected anything else from Seokjae. It is reported that in front of us is the captain of the Rapid Response Guard, holding the rank of a Seokjae, whose face we see orders to stop talking. With a giant hammer in his hand, he approaches his fighters and orders everyone to prepare for a fight with the boss, who should appear soon. The guy squatting next to the monster's corpse asks why they should worry if their captain is a rank and a boss of the same rank shouldn't pose much of a threat to him. Seokjae replies that even in this case, one must not let one's guard down and must always be on guard. Snake heads are reflected in the skyscraper's mirrors. Seokjae sighs heavily and says that no one knows where the enemy might attack from. A multi-headed monster appears above the commander and his soldiers. The soldiers look up in amazement. There is a giant tail in front of them. It falls to the ground and scatters the soldiers in different directions. One of the soldiers asks in amazement where the Hydra came from in the A-rank gate. The girl standing nearby realizes that someone was just in the place where the tail is now. Drops of blood are dripping from the snake's tail. Seokjae looks at the enemy in amazement. He notices the hand of a dead man. In front of us is the captain's right eye. A huge monster towers over the skyscrapers. It is reported that before us is the boss of the Hydra gate, which has a rank AA. Seokjae orders to sound the alarm. The soldiers begin to shoot at the enemy with missile systems. The captain orders not to spare ammunition. The Hydra, whose eye we see, strikes again with its tail. It causes serious destruction. Seokjae stands with a huge hammer in his hands. The captain is trying to understand how a monster of rank A appeared in the gate of rank A. He suspects that there was a distortion of the gate, which means that serious reinforcements are needed. One of the heads of the Hydra notices the fighters trying to hide. The eyes of the monster are burning with an eerie red fire. One of the fighters, whose eye we see, understands that there is no chance of salvation. The Hydra spews out a stream of purple energy. We see the same picture from above. One of the fighters covers the other, trying to protect him from the monster. The soldier opens one eye to see what is happening. Seokjae thrusts his weapon into the ground. The commander breathes heavily. He understands that they can't just wait around doing nothing. There are many dead soldiers around him. The captain thinks that they need to buy time until reinforcements arrive. The problem is that each of the heads is almost at the level of a rank in strength, and when all 9 heads attack at the same time, it is impossible to survive. Blood flows from the captain's mouth. He holds onto his weapon tightly and realizes that he can't just give up. The ground cracks under his feet. Seokjae thinks that as long as there are people left to protect and as long as he has the strength, he will fight. Seokjae jumps into the air and raises a huge hammer to strike. The captain grits his teeth from the enormous effort. He brings his weapon down on the Hydra. Rock fragments are visible around the commander. There are 2 flattened heads of the Hydra lying on the ground. Seok-jae realizes that the power of his attack was enough to destroy only 2 of the 9 heads. A purple whirlwind is visible in the mouth of the Hydra. The captain looks up in despair. A huge hammer flies up. Clouds of dust are visible next to Seok-jae. The captain lies on the ground. He thinks that he can't just lie in front of the enemy. The monster spews streams of purple energy. Seok-jae looks at this and understands that if this monster breaks through, then everything around will come to an end. Blood oozes from Seok-jae's mouth. He mentally curses the enemy who is too powerful. A discharge of yellow energy is visible above the Hydra. Seok-jae looks up in amazement. He tries to understand what is happening. A young man is reflected in his eyes, emitting electrical discharges around himself. The guy calmly approaches the Hydra. Seok-jae seems to recognize who it is. We see the face of the young man, half covered by hair, already familiar to us. Yellow discharges sparkle around his raised right hand. Seok-jae thinks that a real god is in front of him. The hero hovers over the Hydra and says that he has finally found this boss. Angrily looking at the enemy, he asks if he understands what he has done. The guy suggests that the monster find an excuse for himself. The monster looks at the young man with all its heads in bewilderment. The Hydra rushes to attack the guy hanging in the air. Lowering his hands, the hero states that the monster decided to end the matter in such a bad way. The guy generates an electric discharge with his right hand. He says that he had no doubt that his opponent needs a good spanking. The young man looks tiny against the background of the giant enemy. He screams that he is punishing the Hydra for his laptop. The guy inflicts many blows on the huge body of the enemy. He screams shrilly that this is a punishment for the draft that was lost because of the Hydra, and this situation can no longer be corrected. The young man dusts off his jacket and declares that there is something much more important. The Hydra looks at the idiotic enemy with fear, who raises his right hand and snaps his fingers. The young man's face distorts with anger. He emits a discharge from his finger, which falls to the ground. The hero screams that the Hydra has ruined his promising debut. A trace of a bright explosion is visible behind the young man. The guy looks at the monster with a twisted mouth and says that he fried the monster completely, but this did not make him feel any better. The hero leaves the defeated monster and says that he has a deadline for submitting the text tomorrow. The guy does not understand how he will be able to write his novella in such a short time. The soldiers lying on the ground groan heavily. One of them clutches his head and says that he was knocked out. The girl, who is a little further away, asks what happened here. She remembers that they recently fought the Hydra. The young men look at the captain leaning against a large rock and call him. The fighter approaches his commander and lifts him up. He says that, thank God, Seok-jae is alive, after which he suggests waiting for the rescue team. The girl notices something not far from her and suggests looking in that direction. The fighters look at the corpse of the monster in amazement. One of the soldiers draws attention to the huge dent on the monster's head. It is suggested that the Hydra died from a very serious blow. The guy and the girl look at someone in amazement. Seok-jae lies unconscious. It seems that his subordinates think that he was the one who dealt with the monster. The captain winces in pain. Reporter Kim Gi-mai reports from the Mapo district of Seoul and reports that for the first time in 2 years, an A-rank gate has suddenly opened in Korea and its boss is AAA rank Hydra. A shadow can be seen on the bed behind the curtain, and the reporter says that a man stood in the way of this monstrous beast, and despite only being in a rank, he managed to win. The young man waves his hand, unable to say anything, and the reporter declares that this hero is none other than Seok-jae, also known by the call sign Bulldozer. We see a huge explosion. A journalist says that a video called Hydra Annihilation was uploaded to YouTube and instantly earned over 100 million views, according to available information. Mr. Seok-jae, who heroically defeated the monster and saved the citizens from danger, will need 14 weeks to recover. In addition to everything else, he will have to treat his vocal cords, which were irreversibly damaged. Seok-jae, who has a broken arm and leg, looks helplessly at the reporter's cameras, unable to say anything. We are reminded of how the captain showered curses during the battle. Kim Gi-mai reports that the cause of the cord injury is presumably the stream of curses that the hero directed at the Hydra at the most critical moment. We see a white stripe. In front of us are participants of some kind of meeting. A man in a suit, holding out his right hand, declares that the available video is quite enough to immediately recruit Seok-jae, who defeated the AA rank Hydra, into the Guardians Guild. The people gathered at the table are shown from above. One of them says that he cannot agree with this, because the captain is only in a rank. Someone objects, saying that he could very well be promoted to S rank. Besides, at the moment in Korea there are not many hunters with such a level of strength. Someone says that, according to available information, the captain is very proud of working in the Guardian Guild. We see the girl's eyes. She mentally remembers some Tae Iseo and calls him a brainless moron. We see the face of this man above the girl's head. She says that he did something unimaginable again. The beauty sadly looks to her left and thinks that this guy has no idea about restraint. She looks at one of the people present and thinks that if Hwang suspects that this gate was closed by the Thunder Emperor, there will be a lot of problems. The gray-haired old man smiles and strokes his chin with his finger, asking if everyone here really believes that one hunter dealt with everything. The man says that he, for one, does not think so. It is reported that in front of us is the head of the Guardian Guild Hwang, who has an S rank. The girl smiles. She realizes that the old man immediately understood everything, and now her brother is finished. Hwang looks at the girl and asks if Crimson Flame agrees with him. The girl smiles sweetly and asks what the head of the guild means. The old man turns away from those present and asks if they really believe that an rank hunter defeated a Hydra. Hwang says that he himself will never believe it and would rather attribute this success to one legendary hunter. Hwang looks out the window. He says that this character ignored him at one time and disappeared without a trace, and now he finally showed up. The guild leader raises his right hand and, smiling, says that he will definitely find the Thunder Emperor. The hero trembles. He is sitting on the other side of the table from the brunette, who is looking at something on the tablet screen. The man in glasses calls out to the writer named Tae Iseo. The hero looks at the man with hope and makes it clear that he is listening to him. The tablet lands on the table with a loud sound. The man adjusts his glasses and says that this cannot go on any longer. It is reported that in front of us is Kyung-mo, the editor of the third group of the Golden Mark Publishing House. We see the mouth of this man. He says that everything written by the hero is simply uninteresting. His descriptions are quite good, but the editor is already tired of repeating that monsters always die after the first blow. Kyung-mo tells the author that his stories lack realism. Hyan looks at the editor with his mouth slightly open, and the editor says that if this continues, readers will not empathize with the character, will lose interest, and will abandon the novel. Hyan puts his glass on the table and says that he did everything he could to describe the process as vividly and interestingly as possible, and the editor provides a quote in which the author uses foul language to describe the chimera's brain spilling out. Kyung-mo sighs heavily and tells the hero that he expects more detailed descriptions from him. The editor hands the young man a tablet, asking if he watched the morning news, which reported how a hunter from the Guardians Guild almost died saving people from a gate that suddenly opened. Kyung-mo asks the hero to imagine how an ordinary hunter, who is not even a high-ranking one, risked his life to save ordinary people. The expert in literary styles describes how the captain fought the monster and depicts in detail the reactions of his comrades, and encourages his interlocutor to imagine how tense and desperate the fight was. We see the editor's right eye. He states that people felt all the events that happened there, although they were not at the scene, and that is why everyone will remember the name of this hunter. Two excited young people look at the phone screen. The girl looks at the huge monitor on the top of a multi-story building. Kyung-mo states that all these people felt the effect of presence. In front of us is a guy crying from an excess of feelings and jubilant characters who are holding posters with the name of the hero who defeated the Hydra. Kyung-mo once again emphasizes that these people seem to have experienced everything that was happening in the soul of that fearless warrior. Kyung-mo clenches his fist and brings it to his face. He states that empathy with the character and immersion in his world is the essence of realism. Hyan looks at the editor in amazement. He bows his head and says that he never thought about it like that, after which he asks for forgiveness. The editor is surprised by the reaction of the young man. He hands the hero a tablet and says that since he understood everything, he will get another week. Kyung-mo politely asks the aspiring writer to rewrite everything within this time. Hyan stands up and bows low. He sincerely thanks the editor and promises to do everything as required this time. Already outside the door, Kyung-mo says that Tae Iseo will have to do everything exactly like this, because if he doesn't like the story next time, the hero will have to prepare to terminate the contract. Hyan stands, leaning low over the table. Streams of sweat are pouring down his body. The words about terminating the contract are spinning in the young man's head. In front of us is a modest two-story building. Hyan enters the room where his brother is sitting and sighs heavily. Ijun says that a mistake of nature has come home. The hero collapses on the sofa. Ijun sighs in irritation. He hits his brother on the head and demands that he stop puffing like a steam locomotive. Hyan clutches his head. His brother asks him what happened. The hero says that he doesn't know what to do now. The young man cries inconsolably and screams that he could be fired. Ijun sadly closes his eyes. He clarifies with his relative if his contract will really be terminated if he doesn't edit the material properly. The brothers sit on the couch. The one in the white t-shirt asks if Hyan really has to make the story more realistic, and he has no idea how exactly to achieve this. He answers that everything is exactly like that. Ijun looks at his brother and asks what he wrote before. Hyan raises his hands and irritably states that his hero defeated 30 rank monsters with one attack. But, as it turns out, this has nothing to do with realism. He asks what is illogical if the monsters are not even S rank. Ijun sighs heavily, thoughtfully rubbing the back of his head. He looks at his brother and asks him if he ever fought properly. Hyan asks again, puzzled. Clenching his fist in anger, the hero says that, of course, he fought. Ijun asks when it was. Hyan, smiling, raises his index finger. He says that all this happened when the gates of chaos opened. He fought against the beast of destruction for 70 hours straight, and during this time he almost turned into a living skeleton. Ijun thoughtfully rubs his chin. He asks how that case can even be taken as an example, because it was a fight on the brink of the apocalypse. The hero asks again, surprised. The brothers talk. Sitting on the couch, Ijun asks how many legendary hunters there are in the world. Hyan answers that there are 12. Ijun asks another question, wondering how many people can understand the feelings of these characters. His brother suggests that there are exactly 12. Below the hero's brother, we see rich and successful characters, including the old man we know. Ijun states that half of the hunters in this world are somewhere between F and C ranks, and even reaching a rank means wealth for life. S-rank hunters are not just rich, but determine the policies of entire countries along with the heads of large corporations. Ijun looks at his brother sadly and asks how people can experience the lives of legendary heroes if even S-rank hunters are extremely rare. In front of us is a young man in black gloves. Ijun explains that readers imagine themselves in the place of the characters, so they prefer stories where the main character is initially at about the same level as them, but over time gains strength. Ijun, looking at Hyan through the lenses of his glasses, asks him where to start if he needs to write a story about such a character. Hyan looks at his brother in surprise. He states that the young man should do research and analysis, that is, go watch how ordinary hunters fight. The brothers are sitting on the couch. Hyan asks where he can see this, because he is not even a hunter now. Ijun gets up and tries to leave, asking what to do with this clinical idiot. Hyan clings to him and begs for help. The hero is sitting on the floor. His brother says that in this case you need to go to the Korean Hunters Association, the director of which will gladly answer any question, because in front of him will be none other than the Thunder Emperor. Hyan looks at his brother in surprise, who reminds him that the guy is the only legendary hunter of Korea who defeated the Beast of Destruction. Hyan sadly sits on the floor and remembers that he is actually the Thunder Emperor. We see a skyscraper. A man in a business suit hits the table and shouts that this is just impudence. It is reported that in front of us is the head of the Korean Hunters Association, Park Dae-han. The official is surrounded by a large number of huge screens. He says that after last year's threat of demotion, they have been conducting stable operations with the National Gate and have proven the effectiveness of their training programs for hunters. Next to Dae-han, a screen is visible. The head of the association reminds us that when a French city was on the brink of destruction, they sent their guys as reinforcements, and this helped save the village. Dae-han, looking at the interlocutor, clenches his fist and adds that when Germany asked the association for information about training for hunters, they also provided assistance. Dae-han angrily asks if they are really being denied a promotion now, after all that they have done. The man clenches his fist and says that this is simply absurd. His interlocutor says that nothing can be done about it, since Korea does not have legendary hunters. In front of us is a mustachioed man with earrings in his ears. It is reported that this is the director of the Hunters Association of India, Gulshan Grover. A man sits in a chair with his hands on the table. He states that 11 countries, including India, have legendary hunters, but South Korea does not have one. Gulshan Grover smiles maliciously and states that the legendary hero from this country was brainwashed and suddenly retired. Dae-han grinds his teeth in anger. The interlocutor asks him how he manages his organization if he allows his country's defense to be weakened for no reason. Dae-han indignantly raises his hands and states that it was the personal will of the man. Gulshan Grover says that he only hears excuses, and his colleague in this situation should not ask for a promotion. The Indian, smiling, says that he is repeating for the last time. A country can only be promoted to the top if one of its citizens is a legendary hunter. Dae-han looks at the screen furiously and begs for a promotion to at least the second class. Gulshan Grover states that the conversation is over for today, and their conversation has been going on for too long. He suggests discussing the issue of Korea's position in the ranking next time. Dae-han sees a huge screen with a world map in front of him. The other person thanks him for his hard work. The head of the Korean Hunters Association looks up in fury. The secretary enters, who hears his boss calling his recent interlocutors pathetic bastards. Dae-han throws the papers off the table and angrily asks why they were so happy to accept help from Korea before, and now they send it somewhere to the backyard. The young man asks the director to calm down and reminds him that they still have meetings scheduled for today. Leaning heavily on the table, Dae-han asks the secretary what's next on the schedule. The secretary says that the Scorpion Guild has requested cooperation. The guy warns that before meeting with these people, you should think everything over carefully. The secretary follows his boss and reminds him that the Scorpions have a poor reputation. Rumors are circulating that they are secretly setting up rival guilds, and now they apparently want to use the association's support to monopolize high-ranking gates. The young man looks at his boss with apprehension and says that if they cooperate with the Scorpions, the association's reputation may suffer. D-Han looks sternly at his assistant and states that he is the head of the Korean Hunters Association, and if the guild is recognized by the state, then he is obliged to meet with its representative due to his job. A worried expression appears on D-Han's face. He thinks that, frankly, he himself does not want to see these disgusting mugs, and if he accepts the Scorpions into the association, then other guilds may make claims. D-Han hears another young man talking on the phone and demanding to simply throw someone out by force. He reminds that strange individuals come to this organization very often. D-Han looks at the guy, calls him the head of security and asks what all the noise is about. He replies that some impudent person has come who is seeking a meeting with the head of the association, and this person claimed to be the son of the owner of a grocery store or someone like that. D-Han, with a disdainful expression on his face, says that he does not understand why the children of grocery store owners decided that they can break into the Hunters Association. The head of security apologizes and says that he should have sorted everything out beforehand, after which he says that the visitor asked to tell you that he is from the TJD store. D-Han freezes in surprise. He looks at the head of security in amazement and asks if the impudent person really said that he is the son of the owner of the TJD store. The head of the association opens his mouth wide, realizing that the visitor is Tae Iseo, Aka the Thunder Emperor, a legendary hunter who retired. D-Han rushes to the elevator and presses the call button. He demands that the head of security contact the lobby and inform that the head of the association will personally meet this man. The man loudly complains that the elevator is moving too slowly. D-Han runs into the cabin and screams at the top of his lungs that the visitor should not be allowed out of the building under any circumstances. We see a black car. An unpleasant-looking man gets out of it. He asks his companions to look at the building in front of them and says that the Hunters Association does not spare money. It is reported that in front of us is the head of the Scorpion Guild, Jo Jinnam. Behind the head of the leader, his assistant walks, asking if the adamant Park D-Han really agreed to meet with them. He assumes that this is due to the fact that the status of the Scorpions has skyrocketed. Jinnam puts his hand on his deputy's shoulder with a nasty smile on his face and tells him that they have a great guild leader that everyone wants to meet. D-Han appears at the door of the building. He screams at the top of his lungs, asking where the person who asked to see him is. Jinnam says in surprise that the association leader apparently wants to see him very much. He waves his hand and beckons D-Han to him. The association leader pushes him aside. The man asks if Jinnam knows who he is blocking, and then demands that he quickly get out of here. The Scorpion Guild leader kneels and apologizes. D-Han runs up to Hwang and starts shaking him by the shoulders. He begs the guy to apologize for making him wait. The hero says that he thought he would never meet his old acquaintance again. The head of the association, visibly worried, says that he was informed late about the young man's arrival, after which he asks to name the reason why the guy decided to meet him. He answers that he just wanted to talk about something. A smile appears on the face of the main hunter of Korea. He really hopes to hear that the guy decided to return to the ranks of hunters. Hwang sits on a pile of defeated monsters. D-Han anticipates the return of the Thunder Emperor, who, as it now seems to him, has not forgotten about the association even after his resignation. The man folds his arms over his chest and muses that Korea will be great again now that the legend has returned. Hwang says he just wants to watch the fights. Smiling happily, D-Han gives a thumbs up. He shouts that these are the words he was expecting from the Thunder Emperor, and he will immediately prepare everything for watching. D-Han realizes the meaning of the words he just said and asks again in disappointment. Hwang confirms that he just wants to watch. The guy stretches out his fist and asks for permission to watch the fights of ordinary hunters. We see the young man's hand. He happily looks at his interlocutor and says that in return he will fulfill any request of the head of the association. In front of us is a skyscraper. Inside they are summing up the results of the signing of the contract. We see the text of the document, according to which Park D-Han and the Korean Hunters Association provide full support for Tae Iseo's research necessary for his writing needs. Tae Iseo must reciprocate the favor to the association by fulfilling one request monthly. However, he has the right to refuse if the association's request is illegal, violates human rights, or interferes with his writing activities. D-Han asks if Hwang will really act as the Thunder Emperor if they start a cooperation and allow him to carry out research for his writing needs. The hero, smiling, rubs the back of his head and says that it will not work otherwise. D-Han happily shouts that this is a great option. The head of the association hands the guy some kind of card. He states that they have a job that perfectly suits the young man's requirements. The man thinks to himself that if the Thunder Emperor returns, Korea's national rank will rise and they will once again take a worthy place on the world stage. D-Han understands that he simply cannot afford to miss this opportunity. We see a card up close. It shows the hero's name and rank, as well as his job title, which is listed as Gate Assistant. Hyan looks at the ID card in surprise and asks what this title means. Dehan informs him that this job is mostly given to F-rank hunters. We see a young man holding crystals. The head of the association informs him that these people collect loot from portals cleared by other hunters. The same young man points out the direction of the exit. The hero hears that the gate assistant's duties also include watching over the emergency exits and, if necessary, helping in combat and emergency situations. The young man stands behind a fighter armed with a sword. We see young men drinking tea while other hunters fight a monster. Dehan informs him that, of course, these people rarely get around to fighting monsters, and they mostly just wait somewhere in the back. Resting his head in his hands, the head of the association asks the hero if he doesn't think this is the perfect role for watching the hunters' battles. The guy looks at the card he received, smiling, and says in admiration that he didn't even know such a wonderful job existed. Dehan thinks that of course Hyan doesn't know anything about gate helpers, since he fought in battles where no F-rank hunter would ever go. The hero gives him a thumbs up. He shouts in admiration that this is exactly what he needed. The head of the association asks in surprise if the guy is really ready to be an assistant. He says that of course he is, and asks him to send all the additional information to the Tjingdi store. A bright yellow beam is visible near the skyscraper. A broken window is visible behind the back of the secretary of the head of the association. The young man asks if the Thunder Emperor has always been so carefree. Dehan asks the guy to be careful with his words, then he admits that there is something eccentric about the hero, but reminds him that he is still the greatest hope of Korea. Hyan happily declares that he is there. In front of us is some kind of sign. A guy stands by a 4-story building and declares that he has found a C-rank guild called Happy Together. The hero happily clenches his fist and says that here he will definitely learn about the world of hunters, and this time he will definitely write a realistic story. The hero opens the door, says hello, introduces himself and says that he will work here as an assistant at the gate. He notices 2 bored young men in front of him. One of them looks at the guy indifferently, tearing himself away from his phone. The second guy, who was looking at a frivolous magazine, asks in bewilderment if a gate has really opened somewhere nearby. The first young man replies that nothing has opened anywhere, an assistant has just come. Hyan stands embarrassedly at the entrance. The second guy declares that he completely forgot that the assistants here change almost every day. The fat guy gets up from the couch and apologizes for the fact that their place is a little messy. Hyan understands that he got an idea of what kind of atmosphere can reign in hunter guilds. The young man who was looking at the magazine extends his hand and asks if the hero is happy to meet him. He introduces himself as Man Seong, the leader of the Happy Together Guild. The hero happily shakes the outstretched hand, says his name again and says that he is very glad to meet him. Seong points to the guy sitting in the chair. He says that the guild is a C rank 1 and there are currently 3 official members, including himself and the young man who cannot tear himself away from his phone. Hyan asks where the 3rd member of the guild is. Seong, who sat down on the couch again, says that he was temporarily assigned somewhere. Hyan realizes that he encountered such a concept as the distribution. He remembers his comrades, who belonged to the 12 apostles, who were also distributed throughout the world at one time. The guy thinks that here he encountered a phenomenon of the same order. Seong gestures with his hand, calling the guy to sit down, and says that he is very sorry that he ended up in this guild. Hyan, who already has a notebook in his hands, asks in amazement why the guild leader is talking like that. The second guy asks the young man to look around carefully and say if they work here normally. The hunter looks at his phone and says that they have not been able to rise above rank C for many years, so they receive very little money, and it is barely enough to last from paycheck to paycheck. Seong indignantly says that it is absolutely not necessary to tell everything, especially in such a tone. The guild members begin to argue among themselves. The guy with the phone does not understand the essence of the claims. Since he is telling the truth, Seong calls him a bastard. The hunters look at the hero in surprise when he says that they seem to be very close and look like friends who have gone through many trials together. Seong, smiling, rubs his nose with his finger. He says that indeed after so many years together they are almost like a family, but he would not say that he is delighted with this situation. The second guy says that the feeling is mutual. The happy guild members are either hugging or wrestling together. The hero writes something down in his notebook and says that it's incredibly cool that these are loyal comrades who look like they came straight out of a hunter novel. Seong looks up thoughtfully and asks if the F-rank hunter really sees them like that. The other guy, smiling, suggests that they probably do look like old friends. Hyan, who has a notebook and pen in his hands, admiringly states that with such a level of camaraderie, the teamwork of these 2 hunters during battle must be truly amazing, and then asks when they'll go to the gate. The 3 are sitting at a table. One of the guild members says that their organization doesn't have missions that involve the gate. The hero, raising his hands, asks again in amazement. Trembling with excitement, the young man says that this is still a guild for hunters. Seong, rubbing the back of his head, tells the guy that low-ranking guilds rarely participate in any events. Hyan points at himself and asks what he should do in this case. Seong, picking his nose, says that nothing. The hero happily clenches his fists. He thinks that the gates really do not open every day, and this is true realism. The guy shouts to be given a job and promises to do anything. The second guild member, smiling happily, asks the guy if he is ready to do the cleaning. Seong shouts that his comrade is the one who should clean today. Hyan salutes and declares that he will gladly clean this office. The shameless guild member points at him and calls the head of the organization to look at the youth's enthusiasm. Seong asks if his comrade will really make a newbie do this. Hyan smiles stupidly. He thinks that there is a week left before the contract is terminated, but he will prevent it by understanding what realism is. The hero mentally begs his creation to wait for him. Hyan opens the guild door, says hello and asks what needs to be done today. It is reported that there are 6 days left before the contract is terminated. Seong looks bored and points behind him and asks if the guy can clean the hallway. He readily replies that he will do it. There are 5 days left until the contract is terminated. Hyan enters the guild office and says hello. He approaches the guy who is cleaning the window and asks if there is a mission with the gate today. The guy, almost crying, asks if they would sit around doing nothing if such a task came. Raising his right hand, Hyan asks what they would do today in that case. The shameless guild member hands the young man a rag. Hyan wipes the window. The hero enters the office with a tired look. It is said that there are 3 days left until the contract is terminated. Seong hands him a broom. Hyan looks exhausted. The hero sits in household gloves next to cleaning tools. It is said that there are 2 days left until the contract is terminated. The young man realizes that he is finished. In front of us is a guild sign. Hyan says that the first day was fun, but all week he hasn't done anything but clean. In front of us are several cabinets, including a bookcase. Hyan clutches his head. He screams that he hasn't even touched the creation of his creation, and if things continue like this, he will miss the deadline without writing a single word. On the top floor of a skyscraper, a window dimly glows. A young man is sitting in front of a computer. It is Gu Kyung Mo. Someone brings him a glass of tea. The young man who brought the drink asks the editor if he will work late again because of that newbie. Mo replies that he has to write a report on him. The editor drinks tea. His interlocutor declares that he is sorry to see what the famous Gu Kyung Mo, the editor of authors whose books become bestsellers, has become. The guy asks why his comrade is wasting time on some incompetent newbie. Mo leans his head back in his chair tiredly. His interlocutor says that from what he heard, this guy is not that good. The editor says that he knows everything perfectly well, but cannot understand what exactly in the young man interested him. The editor finishes his tea. He says that in the writing of this young man there is some despair, and this awakens in him a weak hope for something incomprehensible. On the screen in front of the editor is a report on the writer Tae Iseo. Mo says that he will give this graphomaniac one last chance. Hyan sits tiredly in his chair. It is reported that there is 1 day left before the termination of the contract. The guy thinks that he is finished, and this is a complete failure since the number of words in the new version of the story is 0. We see a 4-story building. It is reported that currently, aspiring web novel author Tae Iseo is observing the work of the C-Rank Guild happy together in order to gain experience to write a more realistic novel. The word count of his draft is 0, and there are also 0 days left before the termination of the contract. A young man with a crazy look looks somewhere up and giggles. He says that he is in complete ass and he is finished. The guy looks down. He asks what will happen if he gets fired and assumes that he will not be able to publish for another 10 years. Seong opens the door and tells the hero to get ready to go out since the order has come for the spontaneous gate, and they will go there in the afternoon. Hyan, out of habit, replies that he will now prepare everything for cleaning. The guy who is sitting on the couch suddenly realizes the meaning of the words said to him. A wild joy appears on his face. He asks if they are really going to clear the portal. Hyan joyfully raises his fists. He thinks that he will finally see real hunters in action, and today he will be able to start writing his novel. Tears roll down the young man's eyes. Seong and the second guild member do not look very happy. Hyan asks why they are both so gloomy. The guy, whose name we do not know yet, states that it is due to the fact that they are sent to the B-rank gate. The hero is surprised by such a reaction, since this category is considered not the most difficult. The young man shows 3 fingers and explains that for the C-rank guild they are in, clearing the B-rank gate alone is impossible, so the 3 guilds decided to work together. Hyan is surprised and says that such a decision reduces the risks, and this seems to be good news. Seong says that the guy is right, but not entirely. The leader of the organization touches his forehead with his finger and explains that the problem is with the guilds they will have to work with. A portal is visible in front of a high mountain. It is reported that the action is taking place in the province of Gangwon-do at the Soksan Gate in the Valley of Wolves. Someone in front of the portal complains of back pain and says that he has not been to the mountains for a long time. The assistant of the leader of the guild Happy Together stretches and complains that the gate appeared so far away. Seong says that at least it is good that they finally have work, after which he notices that their new assistant is not around and asks where he got lost. It turns out that the young man is rushing between the hunters and asking them many different questions. The guy thinks that even the stones here look different than in other places. The Happy Together guild members look at their comrade thoughtfully. Seong asks if he really is going to interview everyone here. His comrade says he has no idea. He assumes that the young man is just collecting advice, since he is a newbie. Seong and his comrade are called out from behind by a muscular man. He raises his right hand and says that he finally sees the famous Lucky Ones. It is reported that in front of us is Richard Bear, the head of the Flame Bear Guild, which belongs to the C rank. Seong looks clearly dissatisfied. He did not want to meet this moral monster here at all. Someone nearby calls on his comrades to say hello to the head of the main alms house of the Hunter world. Another character with a naked torso approaches Seong. He says that, according to rumors, the Happy Together guild is excellent at preparing newcomers for other guilds. Someone from the side also mocks Seong, calling him a philanthropist who works for the good of society. Richard Bear smirks as he looks at Seong and says that he would have to be a complete idiot to give away his proteges to other guilds. The second Happy Together guild member steps forward and asks if Richard Bear has finished wagging his tongue. The guy punches the fat hunter in the stomach and says that this bastard is stealing other people's recruits and now he dares to mock him. Richard Bear looks menacingly at the guy and says that this brat has become too bold to try to butt into adult conversations. The opponent replies that he sees only one adult here, and that is Seong, and all the rest are punks who are looking for a fight. In front of us is another hunter. He laughs and says that it is very funny to watch the rivalry of two weak guilds. It is reported that in front of us is Sama Ryong, the leader of the Mantis Guild, which belongs to the C rank. The young man, smirking, asks if his weak colleagues are really going to spend all their strength before they even entered the gate. Richard Bear and Seong look at the impudent young man in surprise. He says that their guilds need to save their strength to help in closing the gate. We see the faces of the three guild leaders. The one who appeared last calls the first two morons and says that even to pick up the scraps, you will have to try hard. Hyan looks at what is happening in surprise and thinks that this is some kind of madness. The guy is writing something down in a notebook at a furious pace. He thinks that even before entering the portal, a gripping conflict began between the hunters, and it seems to him that this is a powerful plot twist, reflecting the very realism he is looking for. Hyan gets hit on the back of the head. The guy who is standing behind him asks when the newbie is going to introduce himself to the elders. The hunter who hit the hero sighs heavily and complains that the newbies have been thinking very poorly lately. He says that if the hero even touches his monsters with a finger, he can immediately say goodbye to life. Hyan looks at the impudent guy over his shoulder. Horror appears on the young man's face. The hero puts on his glasses. Realizing that he did something wrong, he apologizes to the hunter and says that he will take his words into account. Finally, he expresses hope that they will work together. The frightened hunter runs away, shouting at the end that he also hopes for this. Hyan happily writes down in his notebook that even assistants have their own problems with hierarchy, and this should also be taken into account. The members of the Happy Together guild shout to the hero that they are entering the portal. We again see the gate located in front of the mountain slope. Seong advises to be on guard and try to survive. Hyan thanks him for the advice. A wolf appears in front of the hunters. Seong strikes with his sword. A member of the Flame Bear Guild finds himself in front of a competitor and prepares to deal with the monster himself. Blood splashes upward. Seong grabs the hunter by the belt and asks what the hell he's doing, because it was very dangerous. The scoundrel advises his competitor to work faster if he doesn't like something. He says that you need to earn your share. The monster gets a powerful long-range blow. A member of the Happy Together guild, whose name we don't know yet, says that it remains to deliver the finishing blow. Richard Bear turns out to be faster and delivers a blow with brass knuckles. The bearded man turns to his competitor and sarcastically apologizes for not noticing him. The guy calls the bare-chested hunter a moral freak. Hyan looks in surprise at what's happening before his eyes and asks if ordinary hunters' battles really happen like this. It becomes clear that the fighters are fighting not only with monsters, but also with each other. The hero says that this is complete chaos. Two hunters cannot share the killed monster. One of them shouts that he finished it off first. The second demands to remove his dirty hands from the wolf. One of the hunters strikes and hits not only the wolf but also one of his colleagues. He demands that the idiots who are in his way get out of the way, since he doesn't care who he kills. The hero's face is shocked. He realizes that he has never seen anything like this before, and this is completely absurd. Ryong, whose mouth we can see, says that this is very convenient. He stands next to his assistant with his arms crossed over his chest and states that this is why it is best to have exclusive hunting rights. The guy standing next to him confirms this, stating that with such rights they can use the strategy that suits them the most. The hunters of the first two guilds continue to fight monsters and each other. Ryong states that while these weaklings are dealing with low-ranking monsters, their guild will deal with the boss, and this strategy is the most effective. Hwang, smiling, looks up and says that the one they just mentioned showed up as if on cue. A monster, many times larger than a normal wolf, appears in front of the hunters. The guild leader smirks and takes out his sword. Hwang holds 2 blades in his hands and declares that after they finish off this creature, it will only be a matter of time before he reaches rank B. Hwang charges and shouts that after defeating the monster, he will no longer have to cooperate with weaklings. The hunters deal multiple blows to the monster. Hwang flies up to the bleeding wolf. The body of the monster boss is covered in marks from the blows. He falls to the ground. One of the hunters places his foot on the corpse of the monster and says that he loves the feeling of a blade piercing flesh. Hwang happily declares that this is the true taste of victory. The guild leader says that no one will be able to look down on him anymore and that it is time to end the mission. An even larger monster appears in front of Hwang. The hunters look at this enemy in amazement. Saliva drips from the monster's teeth. Someone realizes that it is a direwolf. Richard Bear looks up in shock and asks what the A-rank monster is doing here, standing behind him. Hwang is happy to see this monster as it reminds him of how he and his comrades fought in the S-rank gate. The monster lowers its paw to the grass. White lines are visible in the air. The monster rushes to attack, scattering the hunters in different directions. Hwang looks in shock at the blood flying around him. We see the right eye of this man. It seems that he understands what he is dealing with now. The giant monster is ready to swallow the dumbfounded guild leader. Seong orders everyone to run away as they are faced with a gate distortion. The hunters stand in front of the monsters. It is reported that the gate distortion is an unpredictable phenomenon in which a high-ranking boss appears, which leads to an increase in the rank of the gate itself. The second member of the Happy Together guild looks at his boss in surprise and asks if the direwolf is an A-rank monster. The fighters stand in front of a giant wall. It is reported that A-rank is an insurmountable wall for B-rank hunters. The hunters look up in fear. Someone says that some kind of nonsense is happening. One of the fighters asks why this had to happen here and now. The monster's eyes emit an ominous glow. It is reported that the chances of survival of C-rank hunters in the A-rank gate are even lower than that of an ordinary person in simple portals. A hunter falls from the toothy mouth of the monster. Dead fighters lie at the feet of the monsters. The survivors try to escape and loudly call for help. Hwang stands with his head down sadly. He does not understand why and how this happened. The guy thinks that he almost reached B rank, and at that very moment this happened to him. The hand he holds the sword in is shaking. The guild leader is incredibly upset that this happened after everything he had to go through. Screaming loudly that he can't just die like that, Hwang rushes at the monster. The young man grinds his teeth in rage. He flies far to the side, breaking a large piece of rock along the way. The monsters begin to hunt the hunters trying to escape. The wolf catches up with one of the fighters. The giant monster hangs over the hunter lying on the ground. Richard Bear throws one of the fighters aside and shouts for him to get out of the way. The hunters, trembling with fear, turn around, hearing the order to pull themselves together. Seong, who is sitting on the corpse of a monster he just killed, reminds them that the association is immediately notified of the gate distortion and the main thing now is not to lose their minds. Only in this case they will be able to get out of here alive. The guild leader says that if the hunters can hide well, they will be saved by the fighters that the association will send. The raid participants, sweating, look at the guild leader. He stretches out his left hand and says that he will buy as much time as he can, and those who hear him must run as far as possible during this time. The guy in the white t-shirt looks at the man. The hunters rush away, leaving the Happy Together guild leader alone with the monsters. They thank him and ask for forgiveness. Someone shouts that he must save himself for his family. Seong is preparing to engage in battle with a giant monster. He understands that he will not be able to defeat such a monster, but wants to give the rest of the hunters time to escape and save their lives. A brave man, gritting his teeth in dislike, looks at the enemy. We see a hand that holds a strange weapon on a chain. The second guild member asks the leader why he decided to act like a superhero now. He says that it seemed to him that one of the 12 apostles appeared in this portal. The guy smiles and says that if it came to this, then they need to leave in style and taste. Seong, who is standing behind his comrade, asks if he really agrees to die so stupidly. He answers that they can survive, so there is no need to pretend to be a hero of a war movie. Seong and his comrade stand in front of many scary monsters. One of them tells the hero that he should also run away. Seong, smiling, apologizes for dragging the young man here. Hyan looks at the guild leader a little scared. The guy looks down sadly. He finally realizes something. The hero watches as the monsters deal with the hunters and understands that some have no choice but to run away, and some are destined to die. Electric discharges appear near the guy's face. Seong and his comrade rush at the huge boss. Hyan thinks that in front of him is a battlefield where people fight, putting their lives on the line, and this is actually reality. Hyan clenches his fist. He thanks his guildmates. They fly back, losing their weapons. The monsters are approaching the hunters closely. Seong, covering his face with his hand, demands that Seong-ho save himself. He tries to get to his feet, curses and asks why he can't even hit the enemies once. Seong looks at what is happening in front of his eyes in amazement. Hyan jumps up, clenching his fist. The guild leader tries to shout to him. The hero takes off his glasses. We see the guy's blue eye. Hyan declares that the observation has been made. He points his index finger forward and uses the thunder wheel skill. The monsters fly in the air with yellow electric discharges sparkling around them. Hyan sets the power of his skill to 5%. A powerful beam hits the ground. Seong and Seong-ho look at what is happening in amazement and cannot believe their eyes. The hero looks at them over his shoulder. He gives a thumbs up and happily shouts that it was incredibly cool. The guy states that he seems to understand what attracts people to stories about hunters. A giant monster appears behind the hero. His comrades try to warn him about it. Hyan casually raises his left hand and kills the monster. He states that he has learned a lot thanks to his friends. The Happy Together Guild members approach the guy on trembling legs. Seong realizes that the person in front of him is the Thunder Emperor. Hearing this guess, Seong-ho asks again in surprise. Hyan apologizes and says that he is pressed for time, so he needs to run. Waving goodbye, the young man asks his comrades not to tell anyone what they saw and to go see a doctor. A powerful yellow discharge is seen in front of the shocked fighters. Large rocks are lying next to the hunters. Seong asks what that was. Seong-ho says that his boss asked a very good question. A rescue team runs up to the hunters from behind. One of its members reports into the radio that they are at the scene of an incident where a gate distortion to rank occurred. He reports that an explosion occurred, 2 people are conscious and the procedure for evacuating the wounded has begun. A window on the top floor of the skyscraper lights up. The announcer reports that today a gate distortion to rank occurred. Kyung-mo watches the news on his computer screen. It says that, fortunately, the hunters who were at the scene were successfully rescued. The young man nervously bites his nails. It says that the clock shows 23 hours 59 minutes, and there is 1 minute left until the termination of the contract with Tae Iseo. The phone starts vibrating. Kyung-mo sees a message from a subscriber identified as writer Tae Iseo. He apologizes for keeping him waiting for so long. The editor reads the message. We see the smartphone screen. It turns out that the hero sent a draft of his work. Kyung-mo looks at the phone in surprise and is surprised that his protege sent his creation a minute before the deadline. The young man reads the work sent to him. He really wants it to be better this time, and he does not have to write another report. Surprise appears on the editor's face. He scrolls the text on the phone screen. Kyung-mo peers at the lines of the work in surprise. It seems to him that this writer is starting to get something. Several days have passed. We see a whistling young man. He spreads his arms wide and shouts that he is back. The child points at him and asks his mother if this uncle is a hunter. The woman closes her son's eyes and asks him not to look at this disgrace. The young man smiles, anticipating how stunned his comrades will be when they see him, because he returned with a C rank. The guy swings his sword at the kangaroo. He thinks that 6 months have passed since he was assigned to train in the B rank guild with his cousin. The marsupials beat the young man. The guy thinks that there were many trials on his way, but he passed them all for the sake of his personal growth. 2 hunters are standing on a cliff at night. The guy thinks that after endless training, he finally made a breakthrough and broke out of the D rank. The young man stands on the mountain of defeated kangaroos. The young man imagines himself together with the already known members of the Happy Together Guild. He thinks that his friends can say goodbye to the loser Choi Young-sik and now he will be on par with them, the holders of the C rank. The guy approaches the building and asks why it is so quiet here, because his comrades know that he is returning today. The young man imagines the surprise his friends have prepared for him and is going to play along. He enters the office and, squinting, shouts that he is back. Sik notices only the hero in the office and makes a sound of bewilderment. Hyan looks at the man who entered and asks who is in front of him. The guy asks exactly the same question. The hero puts his hand to his chest, introduces himself and says that he is the new assistant at the gate. Sik asks again in surprise. With a strange twist of his mouth, he points his finger at the young man and says that this means that he most likely has one of the lowest ranks, most likely F. Hyan confirms this guess and asks what does this mean. Sik gives a thumbs up and says that he himself was recently promoted to rank C. The hero, with his mouth open, looks at his interlocutor, who begins to give him wise advice. The members of the Happy Together Guild are walking down the street, hunched over. Ho says that the new guy turned out to be the Thunder Emperor and they made him clean their office. Seong agrees. The guild leader, smiling, looks at his assistant, says that he can say goodbye to life, and promises that he will pray for his soul. Ho irritably states that Seong also shoved a broom at the guy, and if they die, then only together. The leader of the organization thoughtfully rubs his neck. He says that he cannot understand why the Thunder Emperor is in their guild. Ho says that if he knew that the Thunder Emperor was next to them, he would never have made made him clean the office. The hunters walk down the street. Seong states that the guy revealed his identity before he disappeared, so they probably won't see him again. Ho replies that it would be a shame if it ended like this. Seong asks why his comrade needs the Thunder Emperor. He assumes that Ho wants an autograph from the man. Ho, smiling, states that he doesn't collect autographs, but it would be great if their guild had one of the 12 apostles. It would allow them to clear high-ranking dungeons and increase their organization's rank. Seong hits his assistant on the head and screams that it's not about that at all. He calls Ho an idiot. The latter indignantly asks why his boss suddenly started yelling. Seong furiously reproaches the guy for simply not understanding the danger they were in during that mission. We are reminded of episodes from the battle that happened a few days ago. Ho states that he is perfectly aware that they almost died there. Seong asks how dare he say such things. A huge monster is seen behind the hero. Seong asks Ho if he understands why the gate was distorted in the first place, then explains that it was due to the difference in the mana levels of the participating hunters, so it was definitely because the Thunder Emperor went there. The guild leader's eyes widen in anger. He shouts that, in other words, constantly being near this apostle will put them in danger. The man states that he cannot take such a risk since he has a family to feed. Seong explains that he is categorically against hiring a hero. Ho turns his interlocutor's face to the side and shouts that he should not yell at him. Otherwise, people might actually think that the Thunder Emperor is going to join some guild. Ho takes the door handle and says that he was talking about everything purely theoretically. Seong and Ho enter their office. The latter asks the boss if he thinks that the Thunder Emperor would be interested in joining their guild. Seong and Ho watch as Sik makes the hero repeat after him that in this cruel world of hunters, F-rank holders are nobodies. The young man folds his arms across his chest and enthusiastically asks the hero not to worry, as he was lucky to meet a good teacher who will help him become a rank hunter. Then Sik states that in order to do this, he will first need to master some basics. Hyan happily repeats after his new acquaintance. Sik tells the hero that the first lesson will be cleaning, and then notices the guild leader behind him. The guy raises his hand, happily greeting his old acquaintances, and says that he hasn't seen them for a long time. Seong and Ho pounce on Sik, who cries out in pain. It seems that the hunters are going to strangle their comrade. The guild leader screams at him to shut his mouth and not say another word. Sik demands to explain what happened to his good friends. The hero looks at the guild members smiling. Seong asks Sik if he understands what he just did. The confused guy demands to know what exactly he did wrong. Hyan thinks that this is a truly amazing place. Kyung-mo and Hyan are sitting at the table. The editor says that the latest draft was not bad, and it became much more realistic. He notes that the selfishness of the hunters turns the battlefield into hell. He was also impressed by the protagonist sacrificing himself for his comrades and the despair in the air. The guy looks at the hero smiling and says that if he continues to improve, then debuting will not be a problem. Hyan looks at the editor in surprise. The hero sits with his hands on his knees and thinks that if he heard everything correctly, then he is given a unique chance. Hyan happily clenches his fist. He understands that coming here was the right choice. The hero, whose eyes are glowing with enthusiasm, is writing something in a notebook. He thinks that he will continue his training, and if everything goes well, his debut will be simply amazing. Ho notices that the hero is writing something down and asks him what is going on. The guild members suspect the guy of the most impure intentions. Seong thinks that he is writing down all their sins in order to take cruel revenge later. The young people look at the hero in fear. He says that he has something for them. Flames are visible around the powerful torso of the young man. His interlocutors cannot understand what he has prepared for them. Seong is afraid that he will strike them with lightning now. The leader of the Happy Together Guild puts his hands in front of him and asks the hero to stop. He yells that he needs to feed his family. Hyan hands him a white and blue ticket and says that this is a pass to clear the gate. Seong looks at the ticket in surprise. Hyan suggests that all 4 of them go to the gate and clear it with only this guild. Sik raises his hand and says that this is exactly what needs to be done. Ho stomps the guy on the floor, and Seong asks if it is really necessary to take this amateur with them. Hyan happily says that he should definitely be taken too and states that, on top of everything else, he wants to formally join the Happy Together Guild. Seong opens his mouth wide. Sik is sitting at the door of the building. The hero looks up and states that in order to conduct research, he needs to become a member of the guild. Seong raises his right hand and says that he understands what the motive of the Thunder Emperor, or rather, a guild member named Tae Iseo, is. Seong looks at the guy and states that he understands why he wants to be here. However, he honestly admits that a legendary hunter in a C-rank guild is a bit absurd. Ho interrupts his boss and states that they will accept Thunder Guy into their ranks. Seong raises his fist, preparing to hit his subordinate. He calls him a bastard and reminds him that this is not a matter to joke about. Ho boldly looks at his boss and says that he is not joking at all. In front of us is the guild building. Ho calls his boss to remember how they opened this guild. We see young men raising their weapons. Ho states that 5 guys got together when they had no idea about anything. Seong sits on a slain monster. His subordinate reminds that later there were 10 of them, and after some time 20, they enjoyed life for a long time, dreaming of reaching the greatest heights. The hunters leave the office. Ho says that as Richard said, their friends left one by one to start living a real life, and over time, those who remained simply got used to their current existence. In front of the guild leader are photographs. One of them shows 6 people. Ho asks if Seong dreams deep down of achieving the dream they once had. Ho puts his hand on his comrade's shoulder and says that he wants to help. We see the hero's face. Ho states that in front of him now stands not one of the 12 apostles, but a boy who wants to make his dream come true. The boy tells his boss that he can also make his dream come true and elevate the guild. Seong looks thoughtfully in front of himself. In front of him is another photograph. Ho asks if Seong thinks it is worth giving this dream another chance, at least for the sake of Jai-ho. Seong clutches his head and turns away. His subordinate suggests doing it anyway. We see 2 versions of the hero. Ho declaring that he is not joining them as the Thunder Emperor, but as a writer with a dream and an assistant at the gate named Tae Iseo. Seong covers his mouth. He looks closely at the 2 photos. Seong sighs and says that a dream is a very good thing, so he accepts the hero into the ranks of the guild. Hyan opens his mouth happily, and those present welcome him to the guild. There is a black car parked in front of the building. Seong expresses his hope for a fruitful cooperation. The driver of the car says into the phone that he is absolutely sure. A young man with glasses holds the phone to his ear. He declares that they have found the assistant that the guild leader mentioned. Hyan sits at a table in a cafe and remembers the words of Sik, who promised to make him a rank hunter. The guy writes this phrase down on his laptop, admiring its epicness. A young man in a vest asks the waiter what this customer is doing, who has been mumbling something under his breath for several hours. The waiter asks to leave the young man alone. There are glasses on a tray near Hyan. The waiter says that this guy has a good effect on sales. The employees of the establishment look at the visitor who entered in surprise and greet him. The guy is shocked. He recognizes Hwang and asks in bewilderment if he really sees this celebrity. The old man, raising his head, looks at the waiter and his friend and says that he needs to talk to the guy sitting at the table, after which he asks to vacate the room for about 30 minutes, in exchange for which he promises to give generous compensation. The waiter looks in amazement at the briefcase filled with banknotes and shouts that he is already leaving. Hwang comes up from behind to Hyan, who is enthusiastically working. The guy is sitting with headphones and, it seems, does not hear the old man's words about how many years have passed. Hwang, smiling, declares that they have finally met. Streams of purple energy are visible near the hero's head as he works. Hyan, surprised, takes off his headphones. The old man, leaning on his cane, looks at the hero. Smiling, Hwang reminds them that they have not finished with one very important matter. The old man hugs the hero and asks how he is doing. Hwang is so happy that he seems about to strangle the hero. He declares that he has not seen the guy for a long time and calls him his dear Thunder Emperor. Electric discharges sparkle near the old man. He cries out in surprise. Hyan stands, angrily clenching his fists. He declares that he is writing a novel and asks not to distract him. Hwang clears his throat into his fist and says that the guy is still as stubborn as before. He pulls a chair towards himself and states that this time the young man will not be able to get rid of him so easily. Hyan asks what his interlocutor means. Hwang angrily shakes his cane and demands that the guy not act like a fool. The old man reminds him that he has ignored all his calls since he retired. Hyan explains that Hwang called him even at night and did not let him sleep. We see how the hero wakes up from the call and immediately turns off the phone. Hwang angrily shouts that if the Thunder Emperor had at least once let him know that he was alive, he would not have had to call so often. The interlocutors point their fingers at each other. Hwang asks if the guy is not ashamed to treat his grandfather like that. He reasonably notes that the old man is not his real grandfather. Hyan waves his hand. He asks if Hwang has seen enough of him, and if so, he suggests ending this meeting. He says that he needs to write, and for this he needs a calm environment. Hwang, sighing heavily, declares that he understands everything, but asks to answer just one question. The old man, folding his hands in front of his face, looks at the hero and asks why he suddenly decided to return to the ranks of hunters. Hyan ignores his interlocutor. He notices this and, naturally, is indignant inside. Hwang, sitting on a chair by the window, reminds the guy about the shoes that he asked him to buy last time. Above the heads of the interlocutors, elegant sneakers are visible. Hwang states that the black model of sneakers in the amount of only 100 pieces was created by the partner company of the Guardian Guild, and the strongest hunters around the world had difficulty buying. But he was able to get 3 pairs for the hero at once, and this was truly terrible, since people in the company began to whisper that the old man was abusing his position as the head of the guild. Hyan slams the laptop shut and shouts that he understands everything. Putting his hand on the device, the hero explains that he needed to become an assistant in the guild to conduct research, and that is why he made a deal with the director Park Ji-han, who asked him to return to the ranks of hunters as a favor. The old man is surprised and asks if the young man really talked to the head of the Hunter Association, and then asks why he did not come to the Guardian Guild. Hwang spreads his arms out to the sides and says that the Guardians are too strong an organization and it is difficult to find realism in them. The old man asks to explain what the hero means by this word. Hwang smiles. The hero, who has huge problems with the editor due to the complete lack of realism in the works, pretends to be amazed by the slow-wittedness of the interlocutor and pompously declares that strong hunters cannot understand how ordinary representatives of this profession feel. Hwang stretches out his left hand and says that the guy needs to continue his research, and if he comes to the Guardians, he will receive the position of the heir to the head. The guy replies that he has already joined the guild. Hwang and Hwang stand opposite each other. The old man asks to repeat what the young man just said. He replies that he has already joined another guild, and Hwang should abandon his idea of the inheritance. The man, whose profile we see, laughs. Yellow stars are visible around him. The old man admits that he seems to have lost this round. He suggests that the guild that the Thunder Emperor himself joined must be very good and can be bought. Hwang demands that the old man abandon this idea. Hwang angrily clenches his fists and shouts that he has just become an official member of this organization, and if Hwang tries to implement the voiced plan, he does not know what he will do. The old man puts his hand on his shoulder and calms him down, stating that he will not stop the guy. The man's hand is on the young man's shoulder. The hero tries to get rid of her. Hwang calls the guy first the Thunder Emperor, and then by name, and asks to listen carefully. The old man looks the boy in the eyes and says that since he has returned, people will eventually understand who he really is, and because of this, danger will always be somewhere nearby. Hwang looks at the old man and says that he is not afraid of any danger. He replies that they will not threaten him personally. Hwang says that other people who are not as strong as the hero may be in danger. In front of us is the man's right eye. Hwang is sitting on a huge dead monster. The guy looks up and asks what else the old man wanted to say. Judging by his look, Hwang remembers a picture from the past. The hero, on whose shoulder the man's hand is lying, looks expectantly at his interlocutor. We see the lower part of the face of the head of the Guardians Guild. The old man ruffles the young man's hair, calling him a boy and asking him to work hard, and if something doesn't work out, the Guardian's doors are always open for him. Hwang indignantly reminds him that he is already a member of the guild. The old man says that he already understood this and that he needs to leave. Hwang, smiling, turns away. Hwang does not understand what just happened. In front of us are two faces of the hero. The old man thinks that finally the guy looks alive again. Hwang leaves, leaning on his cane. He goes to the car and asks Secretary Kim how much it will cost to buy this cafe. The assistant replies that it will cost 1 billion won. Holding onto the car door, the old man asks how much it will cost to publish. The car door slams shut. The man in the suit is talking on the phone. He tells someone that he is absolutely sure. We see a piece of paper with a photo of the hero. Someone says that Hwang met with Hwang. Jo Jin Nam asks the interlocutor if the hero really met with both the association director and Hwang, being an F-rank hunter. We see the right side of the Scorpion Guild leader's face. He can't believe that Hwang, who is known for his callousness and cold-bloodedness, treated the guy like his grandson. Beads of sweat are running down the man's face. He thinks that perhaps the rumors about the Guardian Guild leader's grandson are true. The hero stands at the door with a phone in his hand. Someone says that the target just left the cafe and they are starting the mission. The answer follows that the start of the operation must be cancelled immediately. Hwang crosses the road looking at his phone. Someone screams hysterically about the guy they were going to finish off. A black car hits the hero. His glasses fly into the air. The end of the previous phrase is heard. The person trying to cancel the mission screams that this is the grandson of the Guardian Guild leader. The man in the jacket drops his phone and asks in amazement if the guy was really Hwang's grandson. We see a smashed car. The man quickly runs away from the scene. He screams that he has nothing to do with it. Two attackers are visible behind the broken windshield. One of them says that there shouldn't have been a wet spot left of the guy. Hwang stands in front of the hood of the car. The villains look at him in amazement. The hero looks very unhappy. An ominous light lights up in his eyes. The attackers ask what kind of damn monster they've gotten involved with. One of the villains jumps out of the car with a knife in his hand and bewilderedly tells his comrade that they were supposed to be dealing with an assistant at the F-rank gate. He calls his accomplice an idiot and demands that he just finish off the victim. Hwang waves his hand in front of his face and asks where that car came from. He remembers his mother's words, asking him not to cross the road, staring at his phone. The attackers rush at the hero. They strike, but the guy leans back and remains unharmed. The bastards look at their hands, around which electric discharges sparkle. The hero generates powerful beams of yellow energy. The attackers lie on the road in front of his feet. Yellow discharges sparkle around Hwang. The hero looks at what he did in surprise. The guy looks around and begins to apologize, stating that he did everything by accident. He asks if the guys are alive. Hyan looks around in fear, trying to understand if anyone saw what just happened. Nearby, someone enthusiastically shouts that he sees Mr. Hwang. It turns out that a crowd has gathered around the black car a short distance away from the hero. People are excitedly shouting that they are seeing the Emperor of Swords in person. Hyan puts his hand to his chest and says that sometimes this old man can be really useful. The guy looks at the attackers and says that, in all likelihood, they are hunters, but he cannot understand why they attacked him. The hero scratches his head thoughtfully and says that perhaps he can ask Hwang about this. The unconscious hunters are loaded into an ambulance. The hero says that he is very sorry about this. Hyan stands in front of Han. The president of the Korean Hunters Association says that he suspected that they were brainless, but did not imagine that they were so stupid. Folding his hands in front of him, the man says that these guys have crossed the line. Hyan asks Han if he knows these guys. Han replies that he even knows too well and declares that they are real scumbags. Han looks at his interlocutor with fear. He stands with a glassy look. In front of us is the right side of the association president's face. He reports that the bandits who attacked the guy are most likely members of the Scorpion Guild. In front of us is Jo Jin-nam. Han reports that over the past few years this guild has earned itself a bad reputation, but after the hero resigned, it was she who helped the association when it was experiencing financial difficulties. In front of us is the head of the guild. Han reports that their leader is called Jo Jin-nam, and he is famous for his unscrupulousness in the means of achieving his goals. The president recalls his recent meeting with the aforementioned character when he rudely pushed him away. Han says that not long ago they had an appointment, but he postponed it when the hero made himself known, and most likely this is revenge for that incident. Han looks at the table he is sitting at with anger. He states that since Jo Jin-nam can't do anything to him, the president of the Hunter Association, he has targeted the hero, who is listed as an F-rank hunter. The man apologizes and says that they shouldn't have accepted help from such scum in the first place. Powerful electric discharges flash around the hero. He says that nothing terrible happened. Han grabs his heart in fear. He realizes that it is ready to jump out of his chest just because he is next to the hero. The man's hand trembles. The papers that were lying on his table fly high into the air. The young man's eyes emit a frightening glow. Han realizes that in front of him is the real Thunder Emperor. He jumps up from his seat and demands that Hyan calm down. We see the back of the Thunder Emperor's head. Han states that if the guy is worried about the guild he joined, the association will do everything to ensure that its members do not get hurt. Then he asks the guy to calm down again. Hyan has a smile on his face. He thinks that all of this is just wonderful, since this is the pinnacle of realism in front of him. The hero has a crazy smile on his face. He realizes that the competition among hunters continues even outside the gate, and if you get in their way, they can just take an attack and even kill, and if the protagonist manages to overcome these obstacles and make progress, then the reader will really like it. Han and his secretary look at the guy in fear. The head of the association asks what is happening to the Thunder Emperor. He smiles so widely that it seems like his mouth is about to crack. The guy thinks that this will be a truly exciting story. The hero clenches his fist and admiringly tells the man that nothing needs to be done, since he does not mind at all for everything to remain as it is. Han and his secretary look at the guy in amazement. He says excitedly that from this day on, as it seems to him, everything will become much more interesting. Jin-nam yells at his subordinates in rage. He calls them assholes and says that he ordered to cancel the operation. The guild members look at their commander guiltily. He yells that if they still continued it, they should have finished it, but instead, 2 of them manage to get to the hospital. The scoundrel asks if his subordinates dare to call themselves Scorpions after this. One of those who directly participated in the operation mumbles hesitantly, after which he says that the guy seemed to have a guard. A fist flies to the young man's face, but he manages to say that after the lightning strike, this guard disappeared somewhere. The bandit flies back, blood gushing from his mouth. Jin-nam shows his fist and asks if his fighters are really complaining about some kind of electric shock. He also wonders if the bodyguard in question was the Thunder Emperor himself if he dealt with the attackers so clearly. The bastard shouts that his people call themselves Scorpions, but they can't handle some kid who has an F rank. The guild members bow low and ask for forgiveness. Jin-nam tiredly sits down on a chair and calls his fighters useless weaklings. He clutches his head in concern, thinking that now he doesn't have to worry about some brat, but about his grandfather, and if the guy really turns out to be Hwang's grandson, then it will be hard for everyone. We see the old man with a halberd in his hand. Jin-nam realizes that he will have to deal with the leader of the Guardians, one of the strongest guilds in Korea. The villain holds the file on Hyan in his hands, thinking that nothing can be changed even if all offensive operations are stopped right now. Continuing to look at the file, Jin-nam asks his secretary what guild the guy they attacked is in. He says that it is a C-rank guild called Happy Together. The villain's subordinates are still standing behind the leader. He says that they will buy out all the orders for gates that can go to this guild, and they will also need to make sure that there is not a single guild left in which this guy can work. The villain smiles and says that if it comes to that, then they will do everything properly, for example, kidnap someone from the guy's family. A girl comes out of the doors of the building. She walks away from the building, stating that the world has really become a better place lately, and now you can even buy ice cream in the middle of the night. The girl looks at her phone, thinking about what she can watch when she gets home. The bandits are getting ready to put a bag over her head. The bastards carry out their plan. One of them shouts that the victim is in their hands, and his accomplice orders to quickly take her away from here. The bandits quickly run away with their victim. The girl with her hands tied sits in the car. She is amazed and tries to understand if she is really being kidnapped now. A black van drives along the road. The girl cannot believe that she is the one being kidnapped. It seems like some kind of nonsense to her. We see a low building. Members of the Scorpion Guild are standing in front of the hostage sitting on a chair. Jin Nam, with his hands in his pockets, says that no matter how powerful Hwang was, he could not predict this. The hostage with a bag over her head sits on a chair. Above the guild leader's head, there are several characters with glowing eyes. Jin Nam thinks that S-rank hunters have superhuman strength, and not only Hwang, but any of the Guardian Guild captains can single-handedly wipe out the Scorpions. A sinister smile appears on the bastard's face. He thinks that if the rumors that Hwang adores his grandson are true, the old man will instantly turn into an ordinary person like themselves. A scorpion's tail is wrapped around the old man. Jin Nam thinks that if he holds Hwang's relative hostage, the old man will not be able to fight at full strength, and then he only needs to tighten the noose, and they will get everything they want. The bastard smirks, crossing his arms over his chest, thinking that this is his chance, and if he can influence the Guardians even in such a shameful way, the Scorpions will become the most powerful guild in South Korea. Jin Nam takes the bag and says that he has never heard of an old man having a granddaughter. The bastard prepares to remove the bag from the victim's face. He states that it would be nice to take a look at the girl's face. Iseo calmly looks at the thug. The Scorpion Guild members watch from a short distance. Jin Nam puts the bag back down. He shouts out the girl's nickname in horror. The bag on the girl's face burns. Iseo frees his hands from the ropes and asks what Jin Nam said about Hwang. The bastard falls on his butt and begs the girl to stop. Iseo, generating waves of flame around himself, says that the bastard seems to have some business with her leader. The girl looks at her kidnapper with a cheerful expression and asks what they will do next. She says that this is her first time being kidnapped and asks to make this event a little more fun. In front of the purple portal stands a young man who happily shouts that this day has finally arrived. Sik gives a thumbs up and shouts for the newbie to pay attention, as today he will show him who is really the coolest in their guild. Hyan, smiling, writes something in his notebook. He thinks that Sik is acting like the main character of a comic book. Seong, holding his head, says that Hyan is acting more and more strange every day. Ho admits that he is close to panicking. The members of the Happy Together Guild stand next to each other. Someone calls out to them. Hyan, smiling happily, thanks them for accepting him into their organization and states that coming to them was the right decision. Seong, rubbing the back of his head, declares that they should thank him. The hero asks in surprise for what exactly. Ho hugs the young man and says that at least for the fact that they are going to clear the portal today, because it was possible only thanks to the permission that the young man got. Ho says that they have their own pride, so they tried to get such permission themselves. The hunter's hand is on the hero's shoulder. Ho says that they were unable to do this because the Scorpion Guild bought all the orders right from under their noses. We see the hero's face up close. He asks the guy to confirm whether he really mentioned the Scorpions. Ho, fearfully putting his hand out, asks if the hero knows these people. He says no. Seong and Ho exchange glances. The head of the guild tries to understand what he did wrong. He is somehow uneasy now. Sik, holding a sword in his hands, loudly calls his boss to go to the already opened portal. The hero looks upset. Sik screams that his blood is boiling, calls the hero an idiot and demands that he go with everyone. Hyan, sighing heavily, takes off his glasses. Looking up tiredly, the guy states that the enemies want to play it out exactly this way. At that very second he hears a call. Hyan looks at his phone. A surprised expression appears on his face. He sees a photo of his sister, behind whom dozens of hunters are standing with their hands raised. A text message says that the girl was kidnapped. In front of us is a correspondence. A user with the nickname Arrogant Punk writes that it was the girl who kidnapped them and asks how this happened. A user with the nickname Gorilla replies that she has no idea and asks if she should ask Jin Nam about this. Arrogant Punk asks who this Jin Nam is. Gorilla sends another message, which says that the guy who kidnapped her is the leader of the Scorpions. We see the lower part of the hero's face. Hyan smiles. Arrogant Punk asks his sister for a favor and promises to give him a coupon for one wish in return. Gorilla asks if it's Santa Claus talking to her and asks what her brother wants. He writes down the mysterious word well in response. Someone runs forward, breathing heavily. A hand falls on the door. Jinnam leans his forehead against the door and says that he almost died. His assistant, clenching his fist, asks the boss what the hell is going on. The guy says that he still doesn't understand anything. Jinnam, who has a black eye, begs the girl to let them all leave. She waves her hand and tells the hunters to go away and never pull such tricks again. The assistant commander says that groveling like that in front of some girl is a real disgrace. One of the hunters approaches the guild leader and states that this girl is only an S rank in name, but in fact she is just a pretty girl and nothing more. He says that if they all pounced on her together, they would easily defeat her. Jinnam screams at the idiots surrounding him to shut up immediately. He asks if they don't know who Crimson Flame is. Flames rise around the girl. Jinnam reports that wherever she goes, only ashes remain behind her. Every gate she enters burns so strongly that even from the entrance to them you can feel the heat. The girl is a fire mage, which is a rarity among hunters, and at the same time she specializes in mass spells. Standing at the door, Jinnam calls his fighters idiots and asks if they really think that a pretty face is enough to get an S rank. He asks them to say thank you for getting off so easily. Jinnam lights a cigarette and tries to figure out when everything went wrong in his life. He thinks that he never thought that Crimson Flame is Hwang's granddaughter. Jinnam was just planning to discipline the insolent guy, but now he will have to give up on his plans for a while. However, the day will come when he will definitely make this bastard pay his bills. Flames are visible around Jinnam's face. The Scorpion leader looks at his charges and asks them to wait a second. The hunters look at the man approaching them in surprise. One of them recognizes Crimson Flame. Jinnam clasps her hands in front of her in a pleading manner and asks what happened, since the girl said she was letting them go. The villain humiliatingly asks if Iseo wants a ride home. She says that it's not that at all, it just so happened that she changed her mind. Iseo snaps her fingers. Hot tongues of flame appear near the Scorpion Guild members. Their leader asks why this happened. Iseo examines her fingers and says that Hwang finally asked her for a favor, and she became curious about why he did it, after which she learned a lot. For example, that the Scorpions decided to play a joke on her brother. Jinnam looks at the girl with an idiotic smile. She says that they themselves are to blame for what is about to happen to them. Smiling happily, the girl holds out her hand and declares that it is her prerogative to mock Hwang, and then brings down a wall of flames on the Scorpions. A pillar of fire is visible above the building. Iseo strokes the back of his head. The girl lets out a cry of admiration. Squinting one eye, the beauty declares that now she looks just like a heroine of some comic book. Jinnam and one of his fighters are lying on hospital beds. The Crimson Flame incident is reported to have led to the collapse of the Scorpion Guild, and South Korea is in turmoil from the unprecedented case, which became known as the S-rank kidnapping. Kyungmo, next to whom his comrades are talking, asks what kind of new type of suicide this is, not understanding who in their right mind would think of kidnapping an S-rank hunter. And Crimson Flame at that. One of the guys says that because the Scorpions felt like the best among the A-rank guilds, they apparently relaxed so much that they completely lost their fear. Kyungmo, looking at the phone screen, remembers the hero. In front of him is a message from Hwang. The guy apologizes and says that he won't be able to send the material today, but he will definitely do it tomorrow. Kyungmo doesn't understand what's happening to his ward. In front of us are asterisks and scraps of paper. It is reported that further we will see what is happening to the other participant in this correspondence. Hwang is holding the phone in his hands. He is loudly indignant and shouts that he needs to start writing something already. The guy is incredibly angry. Someone is hysterical behind him and demands to know who the hero has to deal with if he personally asked for a favor. Hwang angrily turns around and asks if he really has to say that. Iseo clenches his fists. The hero looks at her from his chair and says that then she should say the magic word. The girl replies that she will never do that. She leaves the room. Hwang loudly screams that because of those stupid Scorpios he is delaying sending the material. The girl hears her brother say that this damn gorilla is also distracting him. Iseo grabs the guy by the throat and asks who he called a gorilla, and if it was her, then she will strangle him right now. The hero, choking, promises to tell everything. Iseo says that she does not need anything anymore. We see the hero's eye. The girl lets go of her brother. He says that they are mocking their guild. Hwang falls to the floor and tries to cough. On all fours, the boy says that he almost died before the book was released. Iseo asks in amazement about the guild. She points at her brother and asks if she means the guild the young man joined. Hwang holds her head and confirms this. He says that he does not want to make a fuss and asks to keep everything between them. Iseo runs out of the room and loudly calls for her father and mother. Hwang shouts after her, trying to stop her. In front of us is the house in which this family lives. Iseo screams hysterically that Hwang joined the guild. The boy calls her a damn gorilla. The parents urge their children to shut up and eat in peace. The sun shines brightly through the window. Someone says hello and asks what this is. Ho looks at the packages in front of him in surprise. The hero says that his parents asked him to give them as a token of gratitude for accepting him into this guild. Ho states that there was no need to do that, since they should be the ones to thank the young man. Seong is snoring on the couch, covering his face with a frivolous magazine. Ho states that the boss is sleeping now, so they can talk to him later, and Sik said that he will come later since he needs to sort out some business. Hyan agrees with this plan of action. The young men are sitting at the table. Ho asks if the hero heard about the incident with the kidnapping of the scorpions. He replies that, of course, he heard. Ho states that this is just great news and expresses regret about those scoundrels trying to prevent their guild from reaching the portals. Hyan, smiling, writes something down in a notebook. The hero continues to write. He thinks that in that case it was mostly his fault. Ho states that he thought of something. Hyan looks at him in surprise. The guy says that the ranks of the hunters involved in this story are completely different, but for some reason they all ended up connected together. He doesn't think it's a coincidence. He says that there must be a reason for all of this. We see Iseo and Jinnam. Ho says that the Scorpions are one of the most successful rank guilds, and at the same time they suddenly decided to take away the rights to clear the gates from a rather weak guild, and then they did something monstrous and crazy and kidnapped an S-rank hunter. Ho stands in front of the visibly worried hero. Cold sweat runs down Hyan's face. It seems to him that Ho realized that he is to blame for everything. The hero is afraid that now he will say that he needs to immediately leave the guild, because next to him they are in great danger. Ho states that if you add everything up, there is only one conclusion. The hero sits in front of his interlocutor, worried. He folds his hands in front of himself and promises that it will not happen again, begging not to kick him out. Ho finishes his thought and says that it now seems to him that they will soon become very rich. The guy raises a bank check over his head. He asks why high-ranking hunters would start a war and states that he has only one explanation for this. We see the bank check up close. Ho says that most likely, inside the gate that they will clear, there is untold treasure. Ho opens his mouth wide and shouts that they are incredibly lucky, and since the Scorpions are no longer scary, their guild has regained all the rights to clear, so they will soon become rich. Seong, who has woken up, hits his comrade on the back of the head and angrily asks if he will let him sleep today. Ho falls face down on the couch. Seong asks if he can talk about anything in this life other than wealth, and demands to know what treasures were just discussed. Ho, who has a check on his head, says that he is telling the truth, and the next gate will be incredibly good. Seong solemnly says that if Hyan is already here, then they should go there faster, since after that he still needs to do something. The hero looks at his comrades in bewilderment. Ho shouts that if they get the treasure, they can say goodbye to their miserable life as hired workers. Seong laughs. Hyan, sighing with relief, says that he thought he was finished. Literally immediately his phone makes itself known. The guy looks at the screen of the device. He sees a message from Kyung-mo, who greets the author and says that he wants to talk about the material he sent this morning. Hyan looks at his phone in amazement and thinks that this is 100% feedback. Two girls are sitting at a table in a cafe. Someone greets the author. Kyung-mo and Hyan are sitting at another table by the window. The editor says that at first he liked the text, since the hero has made noticeable progress after talking about terminating the contract. Hyan happily thanks the interlocutor, who, however, immediately adds that it was not without shortcomings. The editor looks sternly at the author. The hero looks at Kyung-mo with anxiety, who asks to answer when the protagonist will finally grow to rank B. Hyan, putting his hands on his knees, asks again in bewilderment. The editor says that recently the text has become more realist, and it has definitely become more interesting. Kyung-mo scratches his cheek and states that the plot has become rather routine, and because there are no events that lead to the protagonist's growth or change, the plot itself does not progress. We see the protagonist grow from a newbie to a seasoned veteran. Kyung-mo explains that the protagonist is usually a weak character at first, but then becomes stronger through various trials and battles, with readers drawing parallels to their own growth story and feeling the climax more fully. Hyan looks at him in surprise and asks if he should show a growth story in his novel. He replies that this is exactly how it is. Here we have legendary heroes. Kyung-mo says that even the 12 apostles were not perfect from the start. They were tempered by difficulties, which gradually made them heroes of their time, and because of this progress, people like them. Kyung-mo takes a sip from his cup and says that, of course, he heard that the Thunder Emperor was born with extraordinary strength. Hyan thinks that he agrees with the editor, although he still does not understand anything, by and large. Kyung-mo puts the cup on the saucer. The hero looks at him attentively. He hears that the editor only wants to indicate that it is time for the protagonist to grow up. Hyan thoughtfully covers his mouth with his fingers and says that then in the next chapter he needs to describe the scene of the test, after which the protagonist will become stronger. The editor confirms this. The guy looks at his watch and says that the time allotted for their meeting has expired. Kyung-mo gets up from the table and apologizes to Hyan. He says that he has another meeting soon, so he must go. The hero thanks his mentor for useful advice. The editor, with a serious expression on his face, looks at the hero and says that before leaving, she will say one more thing, after which she asks the guy to think about what growth is for a writer. Kyung-mo expresses hope that the guy will think about it carefully. Hyan looks at the editor. He says that the protagonist described by the author begins with this foundation. Kyung-mo leaves, leaving the hero sitting at a table in a cafe. The young man, resting his head on his hands, repeats the words about the protagonist's growth. He asks himself what it could be. The members of the Happy Guild together fight aggressive frogs. Seong looks up in fear. Hyan works at the computer. The guy looks thoughtfully at the screen. The hero enters a chat room where he asks other participants to help him with the growth of the protagonist in a novel dedicated to hunters. Hyan explains that he needs to write a chapter in which the hero increases from rank C to B. He explains that he does not know where to start and asks for help in describing the development process. Hyan thoughtfully reads one of the answers. Its author states that development is easy to describe. You just need to show how the main character gets cool abilities or powerful items. Becoming stronger, the hero asks himself if he should just show how the protagonist progresses during training. The guy has a puzzled look on his face. He reads another answer, which notes that if the hero is made stronger purely externally, then the depth of the narrative will suffer. The author claims that the character's internal growth should also be shown. Hyan reads the message out loud, trying to understand what it means. The hero works with the keyboard. He asks his interlocutors what this internal growth means at all. A user with the nickname Hungry writes that it is difficult to convey in words, but usually it is somehow connected with overcoming trauma or resolving some internal conflict. Hyan is shown against the backdrop of a spiral galaxy. The same user writes that if the protagonist is not socially adapted, then you can show how he grew up with the help of his friends. You can also demonstrate how the hero helps his friend overcome difficulties, developing together with him. Hyan falls with his head on the keyboard. He asks in bewilderment what all this means. Tiredly stroking the back of his head, the guy says that he has no idea what his interlocutors mean. A smile appears on the young man's face. He says that if he needs to watch his comrade grow, then he can do it. Seong points his sword towards a huge bear. Ho and Sik hold their weapons at the ready with thoughtful expressions on their faces. The guild leader orders them to hold the line. The monster, roaring loudly, rushes at its opponents. The ground cracks under its huge lamps. The predator's eyes are blazing with malice. Seong, smiling, apologizes to the bear and blocks its blow. Trembling with tension, the hunter declares that he is not going to give in, after which the hunter calls his comrades. They rush to attack. Ho and Sik cut the huge monster with their weapons. The hero watches the battle from afar. It seems that he cannot write anything down in his notebook. Beads of sweat run down the hero's face. He understands that he does not see anything remarkable. We see how the same battles took place 1, 2, 3 weeks ago. Hyan understands that, if you think about it, the hunters use the same strategy every time, and there is no progress. Hyan imagines how Kyung-mo breaks his contract, declaring that they stop all cooperation. The guy thinks that if everything continues in the same spirit, he will not go far. Sik sits on the killed monster. Seong praises his comrades for their excellent work. He looks over his shoulder and asks what's going on with the new guy. Hyan is on all fours begging them not to terminate his contract. The guild leader can't figure out what's going on with this idiot. Seong says that they've finished their work for today, so they can go home. Sik raises his hand and gets his boss's attention. He asks if he forgot something. Seong is surprised and says that if he means dividing the loot, it will be done within a week. We see a clenched fist. Its owner says that the distribution is important, of course, but he means the party in honor of his return and the new guy's enrollment. Sik points at the hero and reminds him that it's been 3 weeks since he joined the guild. Seong has a sad smile on his face. He remembers that he really should throw a party, but apologizes to his comrades and says that he is busy today. Ho and Sik look at their commander in surprise. He leaves, saying that they will do it next time. The Happy Together guild members look very unhappy. Sik turns to Ho and asks what is the matter. He replies that Seong is the head of the family and should spend time with his family. In front of us is a bus stop sign. Seong is riding the bus. He has a smile on his face. The guild leader is sorting through books in a store. The seller shows him bouquets of flowers. The man is holding a bag with a book in his hand. He also bought a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Seong smiles. He approaches the hospital building. In the hospital room, a mother is sitting next to a child. They look at someone, a little surprised. Sincere joy appears on the child's face. He recognizes his father. Seong enters the room and asks how his son is doing. The boy joyfully clenches his fists and says that everything is just great with him, and today he ate every last crumb. The happy father praises his child and says that such a good boy should receive an award. He takes out a book called What Not to Do in Hunter Movies. The boy looks at the book in disbelief and recognizes both the author and his work. Seong stands next to his son's bed and says that he thinks this is the book he wanted, and the child happily confirms his words. The boy, smiling happily, thanks his father and says that he is the best. Seong turns to his wife and calls out to her. He hands her the flowers. The woman looks at the bouquet with happy eyes and asks why her husband is giving it to her. The woman presses the flowers to her chest and hears that today is their wedding anniversary, which they always forget. The wife looks at her husband with happy eyes and calls him her beloved. Seong, with tears in his eyes, calls her his beloved. The couple kiss and the child calls out for his father. The parents look at their son and ask what happened. Blood is visible on the pages of the open book. The boy looks at his father in fear and says that something strange is happening to him. Seong and his wife look at their son in fear. He loses consciousness. The parents try to call out to Jae-ho. Jae-ho is lying on a hospital bed. The mother cries, holding her son's hand. Someone says that thanks to the medicine there is nothing to worry about now. The doctor explains to the father that, as he knows, the boy's rare disease is related to the gate, and he will get worse as he gets closer to the source of mana. The doctor looks at the man with sympathy and says that he understands the complexity of the situation, but, in his opinion, they should perform the operation as soon as possible. Seong's hands are shaking. He says that he understands everything. The doctor moves away from the man and says in parting that he will prepare everything so that the operation can be performed at any time, but asks to let Seong know when he finally makes a choice. The hunter holds his other hand with one hand and says that he will do everything. Seong sadly raises his hands. He thinks that he probably needs to take out another loan, and if he can't do that, he needs to find a good job and earn money. His wife is sitting by her son's bed, crying. Seong wipes the woman's tears and asks her not to cry. He promises to find money for the boy's treatment. The hunter tries to put a smile on his face and convinces his wife that he can handle all the difficulties and will cover the bills for the operation in no time. Jae-ho calls his father. The couple looks at their son in amazement. Seong calls out to him, and his wife asks if the boy is okay. The child opens his eyes and calls for his parents again. A smile appears on the hunter's face. He asks if the boy is feeling better. The father says that it must have been very scary, but now everything is fine, and the doctors helped him with painkillers. The boy asks his parents for forgiveness from under the oxygen mask and says that he should not have gotten sick. Seong looks at his son in amazement and asks what he is saying. The child cries. He whispers that if it were not for him, then his parents would be fine and they would not have to suffer so much. The couple looks at their boy in amazement. The woman kneels in front of his bed. The child once again asks to forgive him. The mother holds her son's hand and says that he should not apologize for anything. The woman lowers her head and says that they should ask him for forgiveness. Seong cries bitterly, clutching his head. He says that they will make sure that the child never gets hurt again, and will help him get back on his feet no matter what. The man vows to do so. The parents grieve in front of their son's bed. We see a queue. Seong is standing in it. The girl the hunter is talking to asks for forgiveness and says that he already has unpaid debts and, unfortunately, he will not be able to take out another loan. Seong sadly looks down and understands that he has no choice but to work as a mercenary. Seong stands over a slain monster with a sword. He sits on a log and breathes heavily. Another hunter approaches Seong and says that he did a good job today. The guild leader replies that his colleague did well too. The interlocutor wipes the sweat from his face and asks why Seong is working hard here, and not even with his guild. He assumes that the man needs a lot of money. Looking down sadly, Seong says that he really needs to help someone. There is a sword leaning against a log next to the guild leader. A comrade asks him if Seong is serious. The hunter, whose lower face we can see, says that he is very sorry. The man is genuinely surprised. He asks if Seong really wants to get 200 million won. The hunter rubs the back of his head and says that Seong should understand how things are, since all C ranks do not have good earnings. Seong sadly replies that he is well aware of this. The hunter looks sadly at his comrade. He extends his left hand to the side and asks Seong to wait a little. The hunter puts the phone to his ear and tells someone that he is calling about the matter they discussed earlier, then asks if it is possible to involve a C-rank hunter in the work. He hangs up, stating that he understands everything. Seong gets up from the log and asks his comrade if this is a high-paying job. The man replies that he is not entirely sure if what he is doing is right. Seong stares at the hunter and asks what kind of job it is, assuring him that he is capable of any work. The man, looking down sadly, says that the B-rank Witches Guild needs a living shield that will take all the hits while they hone their magic, but the portal that will be cleared is a difficult B-rank dungeon, so C-rank hunters are unlikely to be suitable for this work. The hunter adds that if the clearing is successful, the profit will be more than 500 million, and since there is only one living shield, he will get about 100 million. Seong grabs his comrade's hand and asks if they can really give him 100 million. The hunter looks at Seong with a pleading look and says that he understands his situation, but warns him that he will have to fight very dangerous monsters there alone, since this is the hardest of the B-rank dungeons. Seong, whose lower part of his face we can see, replies that it is nothing to worry about. He looks at his comrade pleadingly and asks for help in getting this job. In front of Seong stands a huge orc with an axe on his shoulder. The hunter thinks that he absolutely must get into this dungeon. Two mages are visible behind the guild leader. They say that the C-rank hunter needs to hold out at all costs, because if he cannot do this, then everyone will die. Seong, opposite whom a grinning orc is visible, looks up and says that he will do everything. The monster, sticking out its tongue, raises the axe. Seong holds out his sword in front of him. The monster strikes, but the hunter manages to block it. This is repeated once more. Seong grits his teeth in tension, asking why his rent is suddenly being raised, and is told that the cost of living is constantly rising, and it is impossible to always sympathize with the poor. Seong places his foot on the ground. We see a black female silhouette. Her owner apologizes and states that if the hunter cannot pay the rent by next month, he will have to move out. Seong continues to dig his feet into the ground. In front of us is another black silhouette. Its owner informs Mr. Man Sa Seong that the rent for the guild office will increase by 200,000 won next month. Seong kneels down. Another black silhouette informs him that Jai Ho needs to have surgery as soon as possible. The hunter grits his teeth, covering himself with his sword. His foot digs into the ground. Seong declares that no matter how many difficulties he encounters along the way, he will not give up so easily. The guild leader blocks another blow from the huge monster. Sparks fly from his sword. The man's face is twisted with tension. He screams that he will never give up because he is the goddamn head of the family. Seong raises his sword to block another blow from the orc. The hunter's weapon shatters. Blood spurts from his chest. Seong lies on the ground. His squad members go on the offensive. Someone orders them to use all the mana they have. Seong breathes heavily, looking up. Tears flow from his eyes. He calls out to his son and apologizes for being such a lousy father. The boy smiles happily. In front of us is the top floor of the building. Someone inside it groans. Hyun, resting his head on his hand, contemplates personal growth. He sits in front of the computer and realizes that it is already morning, and his head is about to explode from the tension. The phone rings. Ho is listed as the subscriber on the screen. The hero greets the hunter with a smile and says that he is just getting ready for work. The guy's face becomes surprised and he asks Ho to repeat what he just said about Seong. In front of us is an IV drip. Seong is lying on a hospital bed. His wife is crying bitterly, holding her husband's hand. Ho and Hyun are standing in the doorway of the ward. The hero says that now he understands that Seong overworked himself at his hired job to pay for the operation of his sick son. Ho says that this is true. The guy grabs his head and calls his boss an idiot. He says that he should have told them everything right away because they are not strangers to him. The hero rubs the back of his head a little embarrassedly. Looking at his comrade, he says that he would also like to help the boss, after which he asks how much money is needed to solve his problems. Ho, raising his right hand, cries out joyfully. He remembers that next to him is none other than the Thunder Emperor. Ho looks at his comrade. He looks away thoughtfully and says that he is very grateful for this offer, but he has to refuse. Hyun looks at Ho puzzledly and asks why. Ho leans on the door and says that if the boss needed money, he would have asked the hero himself, but he did not. The guy admits that he thought that Seong's situation would change, so he personally convinced him to accept the hero into the guild. Seong is lying on the bed. Ho says that the guild leader sincerely saw in the hero not the Thunder Emperor, but an ordinary guy, his comrade. Sik runs up to the conversation. He shouts that he contacted the B-rank guild where the boss worked as a mercenary. Ho replies that he will be there in a moment. The guy thoughtfully rubs the back of his head and says that Seong is really either too honest or terribly naive and thinks too much about a variety of things. Ho puts his hand on the hero's shoulder and says that if he accepts his help now, Seong might become disappointed in him. The young man says that they will think of something themselves. Ho walks away from the hero with a sad expression. The hero says that he understands everything. Ho turns around in surprise. The hero looks at him and asks to let him help, not as the Thunder Emperor, but as a junior member of the guild. In front of us are several hunters. Their commander shouts that monsters are attacking and calls for everyone to prepare for battle. We see several rows of skeletons. The head of the mages loudly asks where the C-rank hunters have gone. He shouts for them to quickly get into place and take up a defensive line. We see a pair of running legs. Ho and Sik are ready to fight. The skeletons open their mouths. The guild members hold back the attacks of the monsters. The mages behind them call the guys idiots and ask why they are trying so hard. The mages complain that they are gradually being pushed back and ask the fighters to keep the skeletons away. Ho, shaking with tension, reports that he understood the master's order. The master shouts that one of the monsters has already passed the shield. The guy apologizes. The squad members stand in front of a huge gate. The commander of the magicians reports that they have reached the room with the boss. He suggests stopping here for a while, regroup and prepare for battle. Tired Ho and Sick sit on the ground. Sweat rolls down Ho's face. He begins to understand what B-rank dungeons are really like. They fought only against weak monsters, and there is no strength left. The guy remembers that Seong dealt with all this alone. Ho hears one of the mages telling the guild leader that they should have hired B-rank hunters as their human shields. A girl in a robe stands next to the mustachioed man. She says that the ones they hired can't stand up to regular skeletons and wonders how they're going to defeat the boss. Another mage says that at this rate, they'll all be finished off here. The mage commander holds out his right hand and asks what they should have done since B-rank mercenaries would have cost them 300 million won. He says that they're not bandits and they have no way to get that kind of money. The mages continue discussing the current situation. Their leader says that last time, another C-rank hunter handled everything just fine, even though he collapsed from fatigue in the end, and this time there are 2 such hunters, so everything should be fine, no matter how uneasy his soul is now. Ho, looking down, thinks that the mages are absolutely right. The guy's hand is shaking. He is trying to figure out if he can hold out, and what will happen if by some chance both he and Sick get injured. The hero appears next to his comrades. He greets them. Sick waves his hand at him. Hwang has a rather strange expression on his face. The members of the Happy Together guild look at their comrade in bewilderment. Ho asks what is wrong with the hero and what he was doing. Sick asks who did this to him. The hero laughs. He adjusts his glasses, suggests that his friends take down the boss who will appear soon, and asks if his comrades can trust him and follow his instructions. The mages and their human shield fight the skeletons. There are 2 mages in front of us. One of them asks what is going on and why only weak monsters appear instead of the boss. A girl standing nearby asks if some outside hunter could have killed the boss here. The answer is that if the association catches such a scoundrel, it will be the end of his career, so no one will ever do that. One of the mages turns to the head of his guild and offers to stop the raid here and now. He asks why it is necessary to do this. The answer follows that there are too many monsters and the young man has used up all his magic powers. The skeletons fly apart. The head of another monster falls in front of the mages. One of them says that he does not know why the boss does not appear, but they killed almost everyone here and now they can restore their magic powers and return to find the leader. A blue crystal is visible in the forehead of the skeleton. Someone says that in this state they will not be able to win if they continue to fight. In front of us is the head of the mage guild. He thinks that he only has enough strength for a couple of spells. He looks at Ho and Sick, who look very tired. The man thinks that he will be able to do any damage to the boss only if he is in a groggy state. And the C-class hunters, who are a living shield, will not be able to bring the boss to the required condition. The head of the mages sighs heavily. The members of the expedition stand in front of the steps. Their commander declares that the cleanup is over for today. The mages begin to leave. The head praises them for their good work and says that the circumstances have developed in such a way that they will need to come back here next time. The man puts his hand on the shoulder of one of his subordinates. He declares that they are leaving on time. The girl walking in front complains that her arms are very tired. The head of the guild once again praises everyone and suggests that they have a good rest. Suddenly someone from behind asks the mages where they are going so early. The guild leader turns around and asks again in surprise. Hwang, who is standing next to him, says that everything is just beginning. The mage asks to clarify this idea. The hero, smiling, points at something. A skull appears above the members of the expedition. The head of the mage guild looks at it in amazement. Under one large skull, many other skulls form a human figure. We see a huge bone leg. A giant skeleton stands in front of the mages. It is reported that this is a boss with rank B+. The skeleton's eyes glow menacingly. The head of the mage guild puts forward his staff and, cursing, asks if it was necessary for this creature to appear right now. The man orders his subordinates to prepare all their magic for use and finish off the boss in one fell swoop. One of the mages pulls back the bowstring. He shouts that he will use fire arrows. The second wizard puts forward his hands emitting electrical discharges and uses electric shock. The third guild member sends an ice spear flying. The boss is attacked by various energy types. It seems that the monster is smiling. The mages scream in fear that this can't be and that their attacks didn't even scratch the enemy. The giant skeleton raises a huge mace over the mages, and they understand that their magic didn't work. The guild leader and his subordinates look at the monster in horror and understand that this is the end. Hwang, smiling, shouts to his comrades that it's time to act. Ho and Sick look at the enemy with anger. They rush to attack and start striking. The head of the mages looks at what is happening in amazement. Sick hits the skeleton's leg. Ho aims at the other leg. The mages scream in shock that the C-rank hunters are defeating the boss. Hwang stands calmly next to the stairs. He has a smile on his face. He listens to the screams of the mages, who continue to figure out what is going on here. Ho attacks the skeleton with his weapon on a long chain. The guy smiles, he thinks that everything is happening as the hero said. Ho and Sik look at the young man's notebook. Hwang smirks and rubs his finger under his nose. He says that he made his strategy based on the materials that were available in the association. He had to think about methods of defeating someone below rank for the first time, and that is why he studied these documents. The hero shows an illustration in his notebook and says that the boss will be a giant skeleton. This monster is huge and hits very hard, but as a result, it is slow and clumsy. The illustration shows the monster's weak points. The hero says that these are the joints, and his comrades should aim for them. Ho and Sik thoughtfully look at the guy explaining the strategy to them. He says that humans have an advantage in speed, and they will have to have time to hit before the monster attacks. Hwang promises to give a signal. Ho asks in surprise if the young man really developed this strategy in just one night. The illustration shows the weak point of the skeleton's right hand. Hwang, smiling, rubs the back of his head and says that he is something of a writer, albeit only a beginner. The hero works with a computer and a notebook at the same time. He states that for a writer, any research is the basis of activity. Ho takes a fighting stance. He mentally thanks the hero and thinks that it is necessary to move on to the next step. The skeleton's mouth is wide open. Ho remembers that in the hero's notebook it was written that this boss makes a loud roar before attacking. The monster brings down a mace on the ground. According to the tactics developed by the hero, fighters should move from side to side when dodging, and this will divide the skeleton's attention. A blow is delivered to the joint of the monster's leg bones. The same thing happens with the arm bones. Ho remembers the advice to hit the joints as often as possible, since this is a weak spot. Sik jumps into the air and prepares to deliver a super duper ultra thunder punch. Having hit the joint of the bones on the enemy's right leg, the guy quickly runs away. Hwang shouts loudly that they need to attack now. Ho prepares to throw his weapon. We see the young man's eye. He remembers that, according to the next piece of advice, after the skeleton loses its stability, it is necessary to inflict maximum damage to the core. The organ that is meant is visible between the ribs of the monster. Opening his mouth wide, Ho delivers a blow, which he calls X/. A bright flash is visible at the point of impact. Ho grits his teeth. He flies away from the enemy. The guy looks at the enemy in bewilderment. Sik is also amazed. Hwang cannot believe that his comrade's weapon simply bounced off the skeleton. All three members of the Happy Together Guild look at the enemy with fear. He begins to deliver successful blows. A drop of sweat runs down Hwang's cheek. It becomes clear to him that the developed strategy is just a theory, and if the fighters simply do not have enough strength to execute it, then it will not work. The mages look at what is happening in horror. One of them says that it is all over, and it was clear from the beginning that C-rank hunters would not be able to defeat such a boss. Electric discharges appear around the hero's hand. He thinks that there is no other way out and he needs to intervene. Ho loudly calls his comrade. Hwang looks at him in confusion. Ho asks his friend if he remembers the tactics they always use. He suggests starting to use it little by little. In front of us is Hwang's right eye. The guy understands that we are talking about the tactics that the guild members use every week. We are reminded of the scene of the battle with a huge monster. Ho loudly shouts that even if Seong is not with them, they can still join forces and finish off the skeleton for the sake of their comrade. Sik salutes and says that then he will, as usual, distract attention. The guy who is standing behind the skeleton loudly calls out to him and calls him a holy skull. Sik gives the middle finger. It is reported that this fighter's signature skill is a tease that looks exactly like this. Sik demands that the monster run to him immediately and promises to split its head. He asks how the skeleton can even move if it has no eyes. The monster rushes in pursuit of the impudent hunter, who shouts that it's time for his comrade to act. A chain is wrapped around the skeleton's leg. Ho pulls it and shouts that the monster is caught. The skeleton begins to fall on Sik, who is running in front of him. The guy cheerfully looks at the enemy and says that now they will use the finishing move of his comrade Seong. Ho, who continues to pull the chain, shouts that this is exactly what they will do. The hunter rushes forward and shouts that Seong would have broken the cannonball with one blow, but they will have to join forces. Sik takes a fighting stance. He turns his attention to the core that glows between the skeleton's ribs and uses his super duper ultra thunder punch and X/ skills. Ho and Sik hit the skeleton's core. A deep crack is visible above the monster's head. A bright flash occurs. The monster's head drops, smoke pouring out of its eye sockets. The skeleton falls in front of the expedition members. One of the mages, nervously clenching his fist, notices that the boss is disappearing. The second one says in shock that they still survived. The mages rejoice, throwing up their hands. They shout that they will be able to get out of here. Hwang looks at the Happy Together Guild members in amazement and thinks that this is simply amazing. The guys shake hands. The hero understands that these guys went beyond the developed strategy, did not give up even when their lives were hanging by a thread, and created a new strategy with their own hands. In front of us is the left eye of a young man. Hwang smiles. He realizes that this is the height the editor was talking about. The hero runs up to his comrades. In front of us is a hospital building. Seong is lying under an IV drip and weakly calls out for his son. Barely opening his mouth, the hunter asks the boy to forgive his father. We see Seong's hand. He says that all this is because he failed. The hunter opens his eyes. He rises from the bed, looks around and asks where he is. Seong remembers the moment when he was hit by the monster and also that he tried to get money for Jae-ho's operation. Seong holds his head. He realizes that he failed and mentally calls himself a complete loser. Grabbing the blanket, the man tries to figure out what to do now. The curtain covering the bed is pulled aside. 3 guild members happily greet the hunter. Ho, clenching his fist, asks Seong how he could have ended up in such a state. He wonders if their boss doesn't understand how worried they were. Seong lowers his eyes and apologizes. Ho hugs the hero and happily declares that now the man can rest easy. While he was lying in bed, they did everything. The guy says that the hunter no longer needs to worry about money for the operation. The guild leader looks at his comrade in amazement and asks what this could mean. Seong looks at some document in shock. He asks if the guys really earned this money from hired work. The guild members happily look at their boss. Ho, smiling, says that it is true, the salary for the side job and the money received in the last portal just allowed them to collect for the operation for Jae-ho. Seong, sitting on the bed, declares that he cannot accept this money. The young people look at their boss in amazement. Ho asks indignantly why and suggests that Seong has gone crazy. He asks if he even thinks about Jae-ho. The man holds the document handed to him. He replies that he is not saying that he will not take it. He just cannot afford to just take the money for which the young people risk their lives. He promises to definitely return it. Sick, smiling, stretches out his hands and says that there is no point in this. He suggests just taking the money since they all know what situation their boss is in. Seong, looking down sadly, says that it is all about his situation. We see the man's eyes. He states that everything went wrong because of him. Several guys are smoking outside. One of them says that he is damn tired. The hunter is sitting on the ground. His comrade says that the guy can be understood since they participate in clearing 3-4 portals a day. He replies that he has nothing else to do since Jae-ho is sick. One of the guys looks up tiredly and says that at this rate, not to mention Jae-ho, they themselves will be the first to fall ill. Someone says that this is the absolute truth. In front of us is Richard Bear. Someone calls him the deputy leader. The bearded man, slightly bowing his head, says that the hunters should think carefully. He asks how much longer they have to pay for the problems of the guild leader, after which he declares that as long as things go this way, their organization will never get rank B. In front of us are 2 tired hunters. Richard says that now they are all working themselves to death just to keep up with the leader. They are very tired, get injured, and one after another go to the hospital. A smile appears on Richard's face. Seong, who is sitting around the corner, hears his deputy declare that he is going to create his own guild. The man thinks that this is only his fault. The breakaway members of the organization leave. Seong sadly looks at the photo. We see it up close. Now we see a picture of the guild leader's family. Seong thinking that he couldn't save his dream or his loved ones. Seong, whose back we see, says that all this is because he put all the burden of responsibility on the shoulders of his comrades. He says that tomorrow they will need to think about what they will do with their lives. Ho leans towards his boss and angrily says that all this happened because of a scoundrel named Richard Bear. Sick asks to explain why the boss is at fault. We see the hero's profile. He looks sadly at the man and says that he will remain an assistant. Seong, frowning at the guy, asks him to explain what he means. Hyan says that, to tell the truth, he was recently told that the protagonist of his novel is marking time. The hero states that at first he did not understand anything, since from his point of view, the character was steadily increasing in rank, learning new skills and becoming stronger. There is a powerful flash. Hyan says that then with the help of everyone here he realized that development is not only about this. Seong still frowns at the boy. He says that when hunters go to the gate, they do not do it just to level up, but in order to protect something important. For example, the last time the guys went there to help their boss, and with this determination they showed courage that is not typical for their rank. The young man stands in front of the guild building. He says that if you think about it, right from the moment he joined this organization, he decided that the theme of his novel would be the importance of family. He asks where, if not here, he can get this kind of experience. Hyan, smiling, states that this is why he will continue to help, since it will contribute to the growth of his protagonist. Naturally, the guild will also benefit from this. Seong looks at the young man in shock. The guild leader looks down thoughtfully. He realizes that he is not alone here, and they help each other for each other. We see the man's eyes. He thinks that, like a fool, he was afraid of being hurt and thought only of himself. Seong sighs. The guild members look at him carefully. He looks up and asks if he can now be a little selfish too. The young men smile happily. Ho says that their boss deserves it. He wipes his eyes and says that he is about to cry. Hyan, smiling slyly, asks if this means that he will finally be able to help in any way he can. Seong, shaking his fist in anger, asks why the guy suddenly spoke like that. Powerful explosions occur in the city. Hunters in full battle gear fight a winged monster that looks like a demon. Hwang orders to hold the line and push back the enemy. He walks forward behind the hunters. The monster deals powerful blows and scatters the fighters. Hwang frowns at the enemy. It spews a glowing yellow sphere from its mouth. A bearded man, who is covering himself with a shield, asks the monster where it is going. The stream of fire that the demon spews out breaks against the shield. The bearded man asks the old man if he is okay, and it is reported that this is Jiang Hongqi, nicknamed Towering Mountain, who holds the S rank. Hwang looks up and says that he is okay. Hwang and Hongqi stand in front of the fighters lying on the ground. The old man thinks that even two elite squads cannot hold their ground, and that a monster will always be a monster. In front of us is the creature that the hunters are fighting, and it is reported that it is Diablo, who holds the SS rank. The old man, whose lower part of his face is visible, asks Hyo-jun to take care of the guild members. In front of us is a mage in glasses, who tells Hwang not to worry about anyone and to just leave. It is reported that in front of us is a S-rank hunter Hyo-jun with the call sign White Robe. In his hands is an old man and axe. He says that it looks like this time he will have to put his life on the line. Diablo opens his mouth wide. Hwang looks up in surprise. So does the monster. A hero appears in the sky above the city. He uses his skill Thunder Wheel. An incredibly powerful discharge hits the monster. Hwang covers himself with his hand from the flying fragments. The old man smiles and says that there are advantages to a long life. He looks at the hero hanging in front of him and says that he never thought he would live to see this day. The old man says that his grandson looks a little uncouth, but he knows him very well. Smiling, the old man calls the guy the Thunder Emperor and asks why he came to save him. Hyan looks at Hwang in surprise and says that he actually came to ask for a favor. The old man looks at the young man with displeasure and asks why he couldn't just say yes. An airplane flies in the sky. Many fans greet their idol. A blonde man with a suitcase comes out of the airport building. He takes off his glasses and says that he hasn't been to Korea for a long time. Smiling, the guy says that he is very interested in how that guy is doing, and it is reported that in front of us is one of the 12 legendary apostles, the god of battle, Sato Kazuya. Park Ji-han, smiling, says that the guest came very unexpectedly, and it was truly amazing. Sato Kazuya, sipping tea from a cup, laughs and apologizes. He puts the cup on the saucer. The guest moves an envelope towards his interlocutor and says that their association chairman asked him to urgently pass on something. Ji-han takes the envelope in his hands. He thinks that it must be very serious if the director of the Japanese Hunters Association sent the apostle himself here. The man, with shock in his eyes, asks if the destroyer and Jaina are really dead. Sato sadly replies that it is true. 2 members of the 13 stars of the Azure Sky were eliminated. Ji-han, looking down in shock, says that it is impossible to imagine. In front of us is a world map. It is reported that the 13 stars of the Azure Sky are hunters recognized as the strongest in the world, and after the 12 apostles, they are the closest to the legendary rank. Behind Hwang, about a dozen dark silhouettes are visible. Ji-han thinks that these 13 people are undoubtedly among the strongest. The young man's face is sad. Ji-han asks who could have killed them. The guy replies that it was the Black Spear. Fear appears in Ji-han's eyes. Sato says that the other guy understands that the deaths of the 2 heroes not only shook the social and economic aspects, but also added fuel to the fire of international conflicts. He reminds them that they all know who is behind the recent incidents of global scale. Ji-han confirms that this is indeed their doing. We see a burning city. The head of the association says that these bastards claim that only those who have awakened are true people, and those who have not done so only exist to be controlled, according to him. The extremist organization Black Spear has committed many atrocities, and countries around the world have recognized them as terrorists and are now closely monitoring their dangerous ideology. Sato gets up from his chair and says that this is true. His association has been monitoring them all along, but this incident proves that they are not just a terrorist group. The guy extends his hand and says that the chairman of the association asked him to pass on a message. A bearded old man is seen above the guy's head. Sato says that in light of these events, the chairman hopes that Ji-han will be willing to unite the power of Korea with the army of hunters of Japan. The interlocutors shake hands. Ji-han states that of course everything is so. Ji-han and Sato look into each other's eyes. The Korean says that they will gladly join the Japanese. Sato states that the details regarding this accident, as well as the potential alliance, can be found in the document he gave. The interlocutors stand opposite each other. The Japanese man says that, in his opinion, the head of his association is being overly cautious. Ji-han asks what this means. Sato looks away and says that he could kill all of these terrorists in one go, but for some reason the head of the association is worried. The guy, smiling, asks if Ji-han agrees with him. Ji-han, squinting, thinks that only 12 people in this world are capable of single-handedly destroying a large terrorist organization. Sato smiles and rubs his chin. thinking that it's time to meet someone. Seong, his son, his wife, and 3 guild members are sitting at the table. Sik stands up and says that if everyone is ready, then let them fill their glasses. The boy happily looks at the people around him and suggests that they start by celebrating his return after completing his training, as well as Hyan's official entry into the guild. The hero in question smiles. Sik says that they should also make a toast to the health and well-being of Seong and Jae-ho. The father pats his son on the head. The gathered people clink glasses. They are going to have a good time. Sik eats chicken legs with gusto. The boy looks sadly at the food and says that he also wants to eat deliciously, but his mother suggests that they try something else first. Ho doesn't seem too pleased with how ugly Sik is eating. His eyes fill with anger. The guy grabs his table neighbor and throws him off his chair. He asks if he can eat normally or not. Sik, whose arm is twisted, shouts that he gives up. Seong and his family laugh merrily. There is almost no food left on the table. Someone says that he is full and nothing fits into his mouth. Sik with a full belly stands next to his friend. The glutton says that he does not understand Ho, since there is still ice cream that needs to be eaten. Ho is amazed at his friend's gluttony. Sik looks out from behind the door and says that dessert after the meal is a must. He apologizes. Since he needs to go to the toilet, Ho says that he will go with him. Seong's wife takes the child and tells her husband that she will give Jae-ho medicine. The father agrees that this must be done. Seong and Hyan put the dishes in a bag. The man says that he will sort everything later. The hero thanks him. Seong, holding a bag, says that yesterday was special. Hyan asks why. Hwang is standing at the door. He says that he heard about Seong's situation from his grandson. The guild leader says that he never thought that Hwang was the hero's grandfather. Hyan throws another piece of tableware into the bag and states that Hwang is not his grandfather at all. Seong is surprised and asks why he calls him his grandson then. The hero explains that it's just the old man's habit and they are not blood relatives. In front of us is an empty hospital room. Seong states that in any case, he was shocked by something else. The old man appeared suddenly, transferred Jae-ho to the VIP room and covered all the medical bills. Seong looks at the piece of paper in surprise. He adds that Hwang also returned all the money they paid for treatment throughout the entire time and even offered them a house. The old man smiles happily. Hyan, holding a tin can, looks at his companion, who remembers that the guy once said that the best way to repay him is to make the guild grow. Seong gives a thumbs up. He declares that once they finish treating Jae-ho, he will start recruiting people for the guild, and after that, it will start working properly. Hyan also gives a thumbs up. The guy promises to do his best. Hyan wipes the table. He tries to figure out what kind of episode of the novel will come from recruiting new people for the guild. Black smoke flows from the rag. Hyan looks over his shoulder. Seong, standing behind him, asks what's wrong. The guy replies that he needs to go somewhere for a while. He flies over the balcony of the apartment where Seong lives and declares that he will be back soon. The guild leader tries to shout to his worker. Hyan runs through the forest. The guy looks around in surprise, thinking that someone suppressed their aura. Rays are visible around the young man. He understands that the energy has recently been emanating from here. Hyan stares somewhere. He kicks. A vague silhouette appears behind the hero. The guy stops someone's hand and asks what its owner is doing. Hyan lets go of his fist. His opponent says that the hero's skills are still good, although it would seem that he should have lost his grip. It turns out that Sato Kazuya is standing opposite the hero. He asks how his old friend is doing. Hyan and Sato are sitting on a log. The blonde asks if the hero really came back just for research to make his novel more realistic. He answers that everything is correct, and he is already tired of repeating it. Sato, folding his hands in front of him, says that the story of how the hero of all mankind disappears and then suddenly returns will undoubtedly be interesting to people. The guy thoughtfully rubs his chin and says that he himself was surprised. Hyan asks why exactly. We see 2 blondes standing in front of a man bowing to them. Sato says that, to be honest, he thought Hyan would give up right away, since when they parted, he had no motivation and acted as if everything was a routine, uninteresting job for him. Hyan rubs the back of his head and says that a lot has changed since then. A smile appears on the hero's face. He states that, nevertheless, all this is fun and he wants to write even better. Sato looks at the interlocutor thoughtfully and realizes that, it seems, something has changed after all. He gets up and states that in this case, the guy should continue writing and never give up. Hyan asks if the young man is really about to leave. Waving his hand, he states that today he was busy with a completely different matter and decided to just drop in for a couple of minutes. Smiling, the young man looks over his shoulder and says that if Hyan remains the Thunder Emperor, then they will see each other quite often. The hero, sitting on a log, looks at Sato in surprise. Ihan is standing in front of a huge window. Seeing his reflection in the glass, he states that 2 of the 13 stars have died, which means that only one force can stop the Black Spear. We are already familiar with the heroes. Ihan says that these are none other than the 12 apostles, but in his case there is a huge problem with this. Hyan sits in front of Ihan with a bored look. He states that Sato can also handle the Black Spear, and if they have already finished the task that was supposed to be done this month, then he can do this issue next month. Dehan looks out the window with a sad look. He does not understand whether the Thunder Emperor will help him if necessary. Clutching his head, the head of the association imagines Hyan saying that he needs to finish his research, and therefore he resigns again. Dehan understands that this madman can do exactly this, since he is capable of even more than that. The man falls to his knees and shouts loudly that he will agree to anything but resignation. The secretary, standing behind the door, listens to his boss going crazy and does not even want to go inside. Dehan, clutching his stomach, sits on the couch. The secretary asks if his boss has calmed down. He, clearing his throat, says that it was vocal practice and says that he can get down to business. The young man puts a folder on the table and says that the hunters have just released a ranking of the most promising rookies, and the first place in it was taken by a hunter from Korea. Dehan looks at the document brought to him with displeasure and says that this is probably the demon sword. The secretary says that his boss should really know about it by now. Dehan thoughtfully rubs his chin. He says that of course he knows, since this is the best of all their rookies. We see a young man armed with a sword. It is reported that this is Seong-woo, the most talked about hunter in Korea, a genius who reached the S rank in the shortest time after awakening. In front of us is a magic formation. It is reported that Seong-woo is a contractor of one of the 7 mythical weapons, which is the strongest from the era of the Great Gate, called Dark Moon. Seong-woo, closing his eyes, puts the sword to his forehead. A smile appears on Dehan's face. He thinks that as far as he knows, history knows 2 people who cooperated with Dark Moon and reached the legendary rank. The eyes of the head of the association take on a very strange shape. He thinks that if the demonic sword reaches the legendary rank, Korea will have 2 legendary hunters. The man, curling his fingers, leans back on the sofa. His eyes glow with an evil light. Dehan shouts that in this case Korea will be first in the world ranking, and he will be the director of the strongest association. The man imagines the face of Gulshan Grover, the head of the Indian Hunters Association, when he hears this news. Dehan raises his hands and joyfully shouts that in this case he will no longer have to deal with the whims of the Thunder Emperor. Dehan joyfully jumps and shouts that the little devil, who constantly threatens to resign, will not be able to blackmail him anymore. Hyan, who is sitting nearby, makes himself known. Dehan turns around in surprise. Hyan, smiling, asks the director of the association to continue, as he is very interested in what he will say next. The man stands in an awkward pose in front of the hero and says that this is not what he meant at all. He replies that he understands everything perfectly. In front of us is a skyscraper. Someone asks someone what he is doing here, although he does not even have time to train. Seong-woo is standing in front of the building. He says that once he reaches rank S, he will have to take care of all sorts of registration documents, so he decided to at least once look into the association. His interlocutor, who is the sword, says that the brat has already reached rank S and has grown a lot. Dark Moon, who shines behind the young man, asks him not to forget that in order to become a warrior like him, the guy needs to become stronger. Woo silently listens to what Dark Moon tells him. He says that on the day when the guy can freely dispose of the power of this weapon, he will become invincible and get what he wanted most. Woo looks ahead a little sadly. He thinks that he can take revenge. Hyan comes out of the association building. Dehan, who is following him, assures the guy that he misspoke due to his advanced age. The hero replies that he firmly believes that everything was exactly like that. The interlocutors pass by Woo. A white glow appears around Dark Moon. Inside the crystal he sees Hyan and Dehan. The sword says that this simply can't be true. Woo looks up and asks what's wrong. Dark Moon explains that his attention was drawn to the boy they just passed. Woo looks over his shoulder. He looks at Dehan standing in a humiliating pose in front of the young man. Dark Moon states that this young man is a true monster. We see the hero's face. Dark Moon adds that this is a monster that he should never fight. Woo looks at the hero with interest. Dehan kneels in front of Hyan, who finally forgives him. Woo thinks that despite what the sword says, he does not feel anything special about this young man. The young man continues to look at the hero. He thinks that, however, Dark Moon has never said anything like this before. Woo steps forward. He thinks that if this guy really is a monster, then he must be useful for his growth and development. Dark Moon fearfully asks his master to stop. Woo approaches Hyan from behind. He takes the sword in his hand. Who asks the boy to calm down and says that he really thinks this is a very bad idea. Woo puts his weapon to the back of Hyan's head and apologizes. Looking calmly at the hero, the young man asks if he would mind training with him. Hyan looks back at Seong-woo. The hero places his hand on the blade of the sword. He calmly looks at Woo and says that he has to refuse. The young man looks at the hero in amazement and thinks about how easily he took Dark Moon away from himself. A smile appears on the boy's face. He thinks that an ordinary person, having touched this sword, would simply lose consciousness under the influence of its mana, which means that he is facing a truly special character. Hyan and Woo stand opposite each other. The latter says that he knows it will seem rude, but he insists. The hero states that he has already refused his request, after which he asks who is in front of him, who appears out of nowhere and demands a fight. Woo smiles. He thinks that Hyan just does not want to mess with weaklings. The guy takes off his hood, apologizes, and says that perhaps he was too hasty. Looking at the hero, he asks permission to introduce himself. The guy says that his name is Chan Seong-woo, his nickname is Demon Sword, and the hero has probably heard of him. Hyan looks at the young man indifferently and asks why this should impress him. Woo asks again in bewilderment. Hyan says that he does not care at all who is in front of him, Demon Sword or a bottle of beer, so he is forced to say goodbye due to his busy schedule. Dehan, looking at Woo in surprise, asks himself if this is really the Demon Sword in front of him. He doesn't understand why such a gifted hunter would suddenly challenge the Thunder Emperor to a fight. Then he realizes that in order for the hunter to rise to the next level, he needs to push off from something. Woo raises his left hand and asks the hero to give him at least a few seconds. Hyan, without looking back at Woo, waves his hand and says that he heard everything and has already managed to refuse. Dehan thinks that everything depends on the specific situation, but usually a fight with a stronger opponent is that very step, and although one sparring is unlikely to be enough, but for a fighter like the Demon Sword, even a short contact with a stronger opponent can mean huge progress. The man smiles. Adjusting his glasses, he puts his hand on the hero's shoulder and asks him to stop. Smiling brightly, Dehan asks if the boy remembers that he hasn't fulfilled his request for this month. Hyan turns to him and asks what that's supposed to mean. Dehan narrows his eyes and says that this is exactly why he came to the association today, but the hero interrupted him by getting upset at his completely natural actions. Hyan rubs the back of his head thoughtfully. The head of the association says that the hero made a fool of him a little while ago, so he will ask the boy to do one simple thing and he only has to listen to him. Hyan asks what Dehan wants. He points to Woo and says that the hero should spar with him. Dehan shows the young men the training ground and says that it is the best of those in the Korean Hunters Association. The figures of people seem tiny compared to the size of the training complex. Dehan explains that this structure is surrounded by dozens of barriers, which are designed to prevent shock waves from escaping the complex. The head of the association happily raises his hand and declares that no one, not even an S-rank hunter, not even a stronger character, will be able to break them. The man says that this way they can fight at full power. Woo thinks that Dehan's face seemed familiar to him a little earlier, and now it turns out that he is the head of the Korean Hunters Association. The guy finds it strange that a man holding such a position grovels before Hyan. The guy watches as Dehan begs the hero to agree to at least one sparring match, and he replies that he does not want to do it. Dehan stands behind the glass and watches as Woo moves towards his opponent. He tells the fighters to take their positions and begin. Hyan stands in front of Woo with a bored look. Dehan tries to understand what the Demon Sword has in mind. He realizes that in any case it will become clear very soon. The head of the association looks down on the opponents from above and orders them to get ready. Then the command to begin the fight sounds. Woo rushes at his opponent. He strikes, but misses. The guy thinks that he should treat the opponent like a sparring partner. Woo looks at the hero in surprise. He strikes again and misses again. Another swing of the sword follows, but this time the weapon flies over the hero's head, although Woo thought that it would definitely hit. The guy looks at the opponent in surprise and cannot understand why he dodged so easily. He thinks that he should use the full power of Dark Moon from the very beginning. The sword, which is behind its owner, reminds him that he warned that the guy is dealing with a real monster. The gem that adorns Dark Moon begins to glow. The sword declares that synchronization has been initiated. Woo lands multiple blows but never hits. The synchronization level increases from 12 to 34%. The young man holds the sword tightly. The indicator reaches 47%. Hyan looks at the enemy in surprise and says that he began to move faster than before. A black coating appears on Woo's hand. The synchronization level increases to 54%. Almost the entire space is filled with black energy. Dehan looks in amazement at what is happening in front of him and says that the amount of mana he observes exceeds all expectations. The man understands that it is generated by the Demon Sword. Woo stands, holding his weapon forward. He looks resolutely at the enemy and says that this time everything will be different. Dehan, watching what is happening, thinks that maybe even the Thunder Emperor will not be able to remain calm in this situation. A strip of black energy is visible in front of Hyan. The sword cuts the hair off the guy's head. Woo rushes past the hero. Hyan arches back and says that the enemy's attacks are becoming more powerful. We see someone's leg. Woo continues to strike one after another. The hero, without taking his hands out of his pockets, continues to dodge. Woo grinds his teeth in rage. He thinks that this simply cannot be, and he cannot hit his opponent. Hyan shakes his body from side to side and even sometimes adjusts his glasses. His opponent realizes that it is almost impossible to reach him. Breathing heavily, Wu stands in a fighting stance in front of the hero. With an exhausted look, he looks at his opponent and tries to understand whether the difference between them is really that great. Hyan clears his ear with his finger and asks if the young man gives up. The black plaque has reached the young man's face. Wu turns to Dark Moon and asks to increase synchronization. The sword reminds the guy that he has reached his limit. A smile appears on the young man's face. He says that he knows everything, but now it is time to overcome this border. The sword emits jets of black energy. It says that it understands everything, but asks to remember one thing: if the guy loses consciousness during the synchronization process, his soul will be absorbed by the power of the sword. Wu grinds his teeth from incredible tension. Glowing dots appear in his eyes. The synchronization level reaches 58%. With a deafening scream, Wu thrusts the sword into the ground. A red and black vortex appears above his head. It is reported that the black moon is being used. Dihan looks at what is happening and says that this is truly amazing. Wu, smiling, says that this time Hyan will not be able to dodge. The opponents stand opposite each other. The sword's gem glows brightly. Wu delivers a powerful blow. The heroes are perplexed. He thinks that it was very good. Yellow discharges sparkle around the guy. The guy realizes that the time has come to show his abilities. Wu, whose eye has turned black, notices lightning. A weak discharge sparks from the tip of Hyan's finger. The hero ejects a powerful stream of energy towards the enemy. The stream rushes over Wu's head and destroys the red vortex. The space above Wu is filled with yellow plasma. Dihan covers his face with his hands in horror. The man looks over his hand and says that this simply cannot be. All the protective barriers are destroyed and the money spent on them wasted. Wu is on one knee. Everything around him is destroyed. The guy smiles and exhales heavily. Still on one knee, he begins to laugh. The hero looks at him in bewilderment, who says that he did not know before that the Thunder Emperor is in front of him. Wu looks at the hero with pleading eyes and asks him to take him as a student. The hero, without taking his eyes off the laptop, says his refusal. Wu stands silently in front of the hero. He bends down and begs the guy to help him since he has a good reason to become stronger. Sighing, the hero begins to tell a sad story about how the boy's family was very poor and the young man loved his younger brother. A man in a black suit kidnaps the boy. Hyan continues the story, saying that one day this brother, who showed incredible potential as a hunter, was kidnapped by an evil organization. A sword appears in front of Wu. The hero says that the boy met the blade, which offered him its power, as a result of which, and this is incredibly touching, the young man entered into a contract with Dark Moon. The boy carries the boy in his arms. Hyan says that, after going through many trials, Wu saved his younger brother. The child is lying in a bed. The hero says that the baby was bedridden after that incident and it seemed like his soul was simply sucked out. Wu grinds his teeth in anger. Hyan says that the boy decided to destroy the evil organization, take revenge and find some way to save his brother, and that is why he needs to become stronger. Wu looks at the hero in surprise and asks how he knows all this. Hyan raises his fist and says that if you listen to the same story for a whole week, you will inevitably remember every detail. The hero reports that during the same period of time he continues to answer the same thing, that Wu is already strong enough. We see the back of the hero's head. He says that if the guy spends a couple more years to gain experience, he will become incredibly strong. Wu slams his palm on the table. The cafe customers look at him in surprise. The young man says that several years is too long. Wu leans towards his interlocutor and angrily says that he really reached S rank in just 2 years after awakening, but he realized long ago that in order to develop further, he must learn from someone even stronger. The hero looks at his opponent. Wu says that during their sparring, he realized that there is no one stronger than Hyan in this world. Wu cries, covering his face with his hand. He says that only the Thunder Emperor can teach him something. He reminds that his brother is still in the hospital. The hero irritably interrupts him, demanding that he stop stirring up his soul. Hyan looks down with a displeased expression and says that the guy got into a very unpleasant situation, but he himself also has very important things to do, and he does not have time to teach someone. A puzzled look appears on Wu's face. He asks what his interlocutor means by important things. He replies that being a hunter is not his main occupation. The young man, smiling, says that he considers writing web novels to be the main thing in his life. Wu looks at his interlocutor and asks again, shocked. Hyan approaches the barrier. Wu, sadly looking at his back, thinks that this is beyond his understanding. The hero calmly walks forward. His pursuer tries to understand how, having such power and glory, one can devote himself to writing stories that no one needs. Hyan almost cries. He is in real despair. The sword, which is behind the guy's back, says that it seems to understand everything. Wu asks for clarification. Hyan runs forward. Dark Moon says that it is like running alone. We see a leg and a white sneaker. Its owner stops. The sword says that if a runner breaks far ahead and no one is chasing him, then, looking back, the person understands that there is no one behind. The hero, standing on the treadmill, looks back. He is alone in the middle of a vast space. Dark Moon states that at this moment there is a feeling of loneliness and emptiness. Wu looks to his left. He thinks that this is the loneliness of the strongest. Dark Moon tells him that this is just a guess. But among those he served before, some found themselves in the same situation. They were too exceptional and lost all meaning in life. Above the hero's head, his second hypostasis is visible. He calls out to his pursuer. Hyan looks over his shoulder at Wu and asks if he is going to follow him all the way home. The guy asks again in surprise. The hero points to the building in front of which they are standing and states that this is his home. Wu sighs in surprise. The guy, smiling, rubs the back of his head and states that he has enough conscience not to do this. Wu puts his hand on his stomach. It seems to be rumbling loudly. The hero asks the young man if he is hungry. Hyan points his thumb behind himself and asks if Wu wants to eat before he leaves. There are many plates of food on the table, and thanks are given for the food. The hero's brother is sitting next to him. The guy asks where the gorilla is. Ijin replies that she is late at work. Hyan says that they are lucky because they were able to see something that they could not unsee later. The mother looks at her son with displeasure and asks why he calls his sister gorilla. She demands that he stop doing this. Hyan says that his sister is a real gorilla. That is why he calls her that. A blow is heard next to the hero's father. The man laughs. He puts a portion of rice in his mouth. Wu seems to feel very uncomfortable at the table with this family. Beads of sweat are running down his face. He thinks that after all he ended up as a guest. The hero's father looks at the young man and tells him to make himself at home and eat. The latter, smiling, thanks the man for his kindness and attentiveness. The hero's father, smiling, asks how close the guy is to Hyan and says that his son brought his friend home for the first time. The two brothers sit next to each other. Hyan says that he and Wu aren't really friends and he just bumped into him. Ijin says that Hyan is probably the only person in the world who can introduce the owner of a magic sword like that. Wu looks down in confusion. He hears Hyan asking his brother how he knows this guy. Ijin replies that the man is actually a big celebrity now. An egg is placed on the rice. Wu looks at the hero's mother in surprise and thanks her. She replies that her son's friends are almost as important to her as her son himself. The woman smiles and looks at the young man and says that he can come into the house anytime to eat. Wu looks down sadly and says that he will. He holds out his chopsticks to the egg and thanks the woman for the food. Hyan picks up his bowl of rice and asks his mother how about his portion. The woman replies that the hero should start acting like a human being first. Wu's eyes are very sad. He remembers sitting at the table with his own family. The boy puts food in his mouth and thinks about how long it has been since he ate home-cooked food. The boy smiles and says that everything is very delicious. The hand holds the chopsticks. Hyan and his family members look at the guest in surprise. He has tears streaming down his face. Wu wipes his eyes with his hands, apologizes and says that he does not understand what is happening to him. One of the sons shouts at his mother that the kimchi is too spicy. Ijin and Hyan wave their hands. The former says that the kimchi is so spicy that he started crying. The hero's father wipes his eyes and says that he is in the same situation. The woman apologetically says that she must have mixed up the dosage of spices. She runs to the kitchen, saying that she will get some water now. Ijin raises his hand and asks her to bring him some too. In front of us is Wu's face. The boy bows to the hero and thanks him for everything he has done for him today. Hyan says that everything is fine and there is nothing to thank him for. Wu says that he is really grateful as he has not felt such family warmth for a very long time. Wu, looking at the interlocutor, wants to say something else. Hyan looks at the boy expectantly. The latter recalls Dark Moon's words about how there are people who have lost the meaning of life because they were too exceptional. Wu sighs and says that he does not want to say anything else and that he was simply too deep in his thoughts. The boy puts his hood over his head and says that he needs to leave. Hyan, crossing his arms over his chest, watches him go, trying to figure out if he was too cold with this boy. A smile appears on the young man's face. He says that everything is fine and he has enough of his own problems to worry about. Wu hears the boy on the phone greeting Xiang Ho. Wu smiles. Dark Moon asks if the boy has given up on becoming Hyan's apprentice. Wu thinks that this is indeed the case and he does not want to bother this wonderful man anymore. Suddenly he hears that the conversation that the hero is having with Xiang Ho is about recruiting new guild members. It seems that the boy understands that this is his chance. He turns to the hero again, who loudly shouts that this will be a new beginning for the Happy Together Guild. Hyan, smiling, talks on the phone. Wu remembers that he really said that he is a member of the guild. The boy, smiling, takes off his hood and says that it is too early to give up. Xiang and Ho are sitting on the couch. It is announced that the day of the interview for admission to the guild has arrived. Sik invites the first applicant to go into the room. The guild members hold sheets of paper in their hands and ask the applicant to introduce themselves. In front of us is a man in a yellow suit. He claims that he moves faster than light. That's why they call him Flash. His real name is Choi Hoon. Ho ironically states that he likes the confidence in his abilities that the candidate demonstrates. The latter says that he is flattered by these words. Seong looks at the man's resume. He notes that his special quality is speed, but then draws attention to the fact that in the description of ordinary skills it is stated that the candidate covers 100 meters in high-end seconds. Thoughtfully scratching his cheek, Seong declares that the man is not suitable for them. Next in line is a young man in strange clothes. He declares that a dark fire dragon is sealed in his left hand. A purple flame is visible in front of the guy's face. The young man says that if he removes the seal, he will surpass even Crimson Flame. Ho looks at the young man in bewilderment and says that his head is on fire. The latter begins to actively put out the flames. Seong asks his comrade to show this candidate where the exit is. In front of the guild members sits a guy with round eyes. He states that he is not an awakened one, but if they accept him, he can become a hero of rank S. Seong says that the young man seems to have mistaken the door and genre. The applicant, whom we do not see, states that he is the stone bridge of Suwon and his legs are strong as rocks. This case is rejected as well. In front of us is the guild building. Another applicant states that he is actually a secret disciple of the Thunder Emperor. He is kicked out immediately after these words. There are sheets of paper with resumes of candidates on the glass table. Seong says that all this is driving him crazy, and even though it is only the first day of the selection, they have not seen a single worthy candidate for the position of hunter. His brother says that he completely shares this opinion. Seong puts his head on the arm of the sofa. He asks if Hyun has not contacted yet. Ho replies that most likely he wrote again all night and does not hear the calls. Ho puts his hand on his comrade's leg and says that they need to continue the interview. He calls to look at the resume of the next candidate. He asks what happened. The young people look at the sheet of paper in bewilderment. A huge man is visible behind Sik. He says that he will still enter the office. Ho and Seong look up in fear. In front of us is the upper part of the resume, where it is indicated that this candidate has rank B. The guild members do not understand what he is doing here. A muscular giant with a hammer on his shoulder approaches Seong and Ho. Smiling, he introduces himself as Nam Du Pao. The big guy sits down on the couch. Seong says he's a B-rank hunter and asks him straight out why he joined their guild. Du Pao says he'll get straight to the point. Making a strange hand gesture, the big guy asks how much the guild will pay him. Ho turns to his comrade and asks if he really thought the man was hinting at something. Seong replies that of course he understands. We see a crude depiction of the C-rank hunters bowing down to the B-rank hunter. It's said that this is what's called face value, where a guild's rank is determined by the rank of its strongest hunter. We see weaker hunters rejoicing over having a B-rank representative in their guild. It's said that in order to raise their rank, guilds often pay high-ranking hunters to join their ranks. Relaxing on the couch, Du Pao says that opportunities like this don't come around very often, so he suggests they make a deal as soon as possible. Seong realizes that the man wants to get paid simply for increasing the guild's face value. Looking down solemnly, Seong says he wants to get this over with quickly. Du Pao says they are glad to hear it. The guild leader says the applicant has been denied admission. Incredulous, Du Pao looms over the hunters and asks again. Seong boldly looks him in the eye, thinking that he will get nothing. The man points his thumb to his right and says that the door is that way, then politely asks the big guy to leave. The big guy picks up his hammer and slams it on the table. Grinding his teeth in rage, Du Pao asks how dare these weaklings act so insolently. Sik, who is peering through the door, hears the big guy ask his comrades if they have a last wish. Sik bursts into the room, calling the visitor a bastard. Another applicant stands behind him, asking if this man has been rejected from the guild. Sik replies that judging by the atmosphere, that is most likely the case. Sik looks at the applicant standing behind him in amazement. Seong rises heavily from the couch and says that if the applicant has difficulty understanding the words, he will explain everything to him in the most understandable way. Seong looks the big guy straight in the eyes and says that their guild has no place for such people, so he should leave through the door. Du Pao raises his hammer over his head and promises to kill everyone in this guild. Someone's hand falls on the scoundrel's weapon. Du Pao looks around in amazement. Wu stands behind him, holding the hammer. The big guy asks what the hell that means. The guy looks at the villain menacingly and says that he was denied entry into the guild, so now he should just go home. Du Pao tries to object. Then he notices the guy's cold gaze and asks what the magic sword is doing here. Seong and Ho look at the young man in shock. They also recognize him and ask the same question as Du Pao. Wu takes off his hood. He sits down on the couch and says that he wants to join the guild. Seong and Ho sit in front of the guy on the couch. The head of the organization briefly recounts the story of a guy who needs to get stronger to cure his sick brother. But after reaching rank S, he seemed to hit a wall, and then he met Hyun and decided to join this guild. Woo, folding his hands in front of him, says that everything is correct and he has little time since his younger brother is still in the hospital all alone. Ho whispers in his comrade's ear that there is nothing to think about and they should reject this applicant immediately because if he joins the guild, it will immediately be promoted to S rank, and they simply cannot handle this with their levels. Besides, they will have to deal not only with ordinary gates, but also with the elimination of incidents of a catastrophic scale. Seong looks down thoughtfully. Ho asks him if this is why his comrade hesitates. Woo looks at the hunters with a pleading look and asks them to accept him into the guild since he must become stronger no matter what. Seong looks at the guy intently. Seong says that he must do it. He remembers various episodes of his battles and says that he is the best. The face of the guild leader is thoughtful. It seems to him that he cannot allow the young man to go through all the trials that he himself had to go through. The man declares that he accepts the boy into the guild. Woo gets up from the couch and asks again in bewilderment. Ho places his hand on his comrade's shoulder and asks if he's crazy. Seong asks why Ho is acting this way, since he was the one who convinced him to accept Hyan into the guild. Hyan replies that the hero's situation was unique. Seong shakes off his comrade's hand and says that enough talking. The guild leader extends his hand and addresses the magic sword. Then he corrects himself, declares that he will simply call him Woo, and welcomes him into the guild. The hunters shake hands. The young man thanks Seong for accepting him. The guild leader places his hand on the boy's shoulder and states that he, too, has a seriously ill son, so he understands all the desperation of the young man. The man says that if the young man needs help, he should just ask. Woo replies that he will definitely do it and thanks the hunter. Hyan appears at the door of the office. He says that he is a little late. He puts his hands out in front of him, asking not to tell him that he missed something important. Seong waves at him and says that they have a new junior guild member. Hyan makes a noise indicating surprise. Smiling happily, the guy asks who it is. Woo, rubbing the back of his head, says that his name is Chan Seong Woo, and he really hopes for fruitful cooperation. A drop of sweat runs down Hyan's cheek. We see the building where the guild is located. The hero shouts loudly, "What the hell is Woo doing here?" Seong and Ho explain something to the hero. It is reported that on this day, the rank of the Happy Together Guild was officially promoted to S rank, but chaos reigned within it. Woo smiles as he watches what is happening before his eyes. He thinks that a team of elite hunters led by the Thunder Emperor has formed here, and this will teach him a lot. The problem is that the only one who was truly happy about what was happening was the magic sword. Seong, sword in hand, runs after someone. He turns around and shouts loudly that now is their chance and they need to attack. Sik and Ho rush to attack, confirming that they understood the order. Ho strikes. Sik does the same. Seong strikes from above. It turns out that they are trying to kill a rabbit that is too fast for them. The unfortunate animal runs up to another hunter. Seong shouts for Woo to intercept the rabbit. The unfortunate rodent looks at the young man with pleading eyes. He looks at the animal with sympathy. Woo looks at his guildmates chasing a rabbit in confusion, trying to understand what's going on and how this can be called a fight. We see a profile of a young man. He thinks about how this guild recently destroyed a B-rank boss. But what they are doing now is a complete farce. The guy does not understand what the hell the Thunder Emperor is doing in such a guild. Hyan looks at someone in surprise and thinks what he is doing in this guild. Hyan and Woo sit opposite each other. The latter of them says that his interlocutor could do his research in any guild, and it is completely unclear why he chose a C-rank guild. Hyan states that it was the only one that hired him. Woo states that this answer is too vague and does not explain anything, and Hyan should have been a writer. The phone vibrates on the table. Hyan asks if Woo really thinks that all writers explain things well. He looks at the screen of his device and reads the text of the message, according to which an SSS rank gate has just appeared in Brazil. The author of the message, D-Han, informs that this is an emergency and they need to get there as soon as possible. Hyan gets up and tells Woo that if he is so interested in the answer to this question, he can just observe the hero and try to understand why he is in this guild. Hyan hands the young man a notebook and a pen. Woo takes these items and hears that as long as he is near the hero, he can help him with research and with work in the guild. An object is spinning in the air. Sik is standing with a broken sword in his hand. The guy's hands are shaking. Looking up, streams of tears are pouring out of the young man. He calls out to someone named Maria. Seong and Ho, as well as the rabbit they were chasing, gather around the inconsolable Sik. Woo writes something down in his notebook. He thinks that he really expected much more, but since he was asked to watch over this guild, he will do it. Seong asks his comrade to stop crying with a sad expression. Woo approaches the guild members and asks if they have time after they finish. The young men look at the newcomer in surprise, who suggests going shopping. The guild members approach the golden statue. Sik folds his hands in admiration and says that he has never been to the legendary hunter's shop before. He points to the golden statue and calls his comrades to look at it. The young man says that it is the Thunder Emperor. Sik, moved, looks at the sculpture and says that it is magnificent. and he himself has always dreamed of meeting the Thunder Emperor. Wu points at the young man in surprise and asks Hwang if they don't know that the Thunder Emperor is a member of their guild. The leader of the organization frowns that Sik has always been a bit dense. He puts his hand on Wu's shoulder and says that he is grateful anyway. The man never thought that they would receive a bonus for moving up a class. In front of us is a phone with a message from the Korean Hunters Association that the Happy Together Guild has received a reward of 100 billion won. Hwang opens his mouth wide and screams, not believing his luck. Wu looks ahead and states that he does not need to be thanked, and the money he received can be considered payment for allowing him to join the guild. Wu looks at the golden statue. He thinks to himself that it doesn't really matter why exactly the Thunder Emperor decided to join this guild. What matters is that he is right next to him. A smile appears on the guy's face. He suggests that his comrades go look at the weapons. Sik puts his hand to his ear and says that he hears a voice. He thinks that it is the sword of the legendary ego communicating with him. Ho runs his finger along the blade of the huge sword and thinks that maybe he needs to change his style. Hwang holds a normal-looking axe in his hands. He asks if this is the cheapest weapon in this shop. The guild members stand with their chosen weapons. Hwang tells Wu that they took what they need and offers to test the new blades in action. Wu, closing his eyes, asks his comrades to put everything back. They indignantly shout that they will not do that. Wu, who is looking at them, tries to figure out where to begin his explanation. Sik points to the sword. Wu asks him to use common sense and think about whether the sword of legendary ego can be sold in a normal store. The boy objects, stating that he heard the voice of this weapon. Ho stands, placing the huge blade on his shoulder. Wu says that he has no idea what possessed the young man, but he should remember that his strong point is speed, and this weapon completely neutralizes this advantage. Hwang looks at the axe and is asked if he is going to become a lumberjack. The man is surprised and says that he took the axe because it has the best value for money. The guild members stand in front of Wu and give their reasons. Sik says that he likes the weapon even if it is not the legendary ego sword. Ho states that he is quite happy with what he chose. The guy also says that spending money on a weapon will not make anyone stronger on its own. Wu raises his hand and sighs heavily. He states that with such a mindset, the guild members will never grow above rank C. In his opinion, hunters need not only talent but also wisely chosen equipment. Ho points at himself and says that he does not know about his comrades, but he has thought about it carefully. The guy remembers his fight with the giant skeleton and says that when they fought the B-rank boss, they almost died because they did not have enough strength to deal a good finishing blow. Ho puts his hand to his chest and says that he chose a huge sword to get rid of this weakness. Wu thoughtfully rubs his chin. He looks at his interlocutors and asks how they managed to defeat that monster at all, because he sees the skill level of the guild members and understands that destroying a B-rank boss is simply impossible for them. Sik, raising his hand, indignantly asks what all this even means. He calls Wu a newbie and assures that they are actually stronger than they look. Ho looks at Sik and says that he understands why it is hard to believe that C-rank hunters defeated a B-rank monster. His comrade adds that, to be honest, he himself was truly shocked by this victory. He thinks that if it were not for Hyen, it would have been simply impossible. It seems that Wu understands something. He clenches his fist and thinks that everything falls into place. Hunters holding a huge bone are seen above the guy's head. Wu thinks that the Thunder Emperor actually did all the work, and these guys still think that they did something with their own hands. He thinks that this is truly shameful. The guy sighs heavily. He walks away from the guild members, bowing his head low, mentally addressing the Thunder Emperor. He says that he does not understand why he wastes his time on such pathetic people. Wu leaves, declaring that he will choose a weapon that actually suits the guild members. They look after him in amazement. Sik asks what happened to their comrade. Hwang tries to understand what they did wrong. A bearded man walks past the hunters. It is Richard Bear. The bearded man notices something. The guild members discuss Wu's behavior. Ho asks what could have made the newbie so angry. It seemed to him that the guy was simply furious. Sik says that it was more like disgust. Hwang, with his arms folded, says that in his opinion Wu thought something was wrong, and when he returns, they should explain everything to him. Richard calls out to the hunters. With his hands outstretched, he approaches them and asks what three beggars are doing in this wonderful shop. Hwang recognizes the hunter and calls him by name. He turns away and leaves, calling on his comrades to do the same, as he does not want to look at the man. Richard mockingly asks why Hwang is leaving so early. Then he adds that he thinks he knows the reason. Sik approaches Richard and says that such scum does not deserve to be in this wonderful place. The bearded man smiles and looks at the guy and says that they haven't seen each other in a long time. Hwang asks what Richard would do if it weren't for Sik. The bearded man puts his hand on Sik's shoulder and looks at Ho. He asks what's going on with the other guy and doesn't he even say hello. Sik says that at least Richard still has some manners, and that's nice to see. Smiling, he looks at the bearded man and says that he once thought he was the coolest guy in the world. Sik looks at the other man in amazement and asks what happened to him. Ho looks at Richard in surprise and says that he knows what the bastard did during the gate level change incident. He reminds him that he ran away and left the hunters who trusted him to be torn apart. Richard frowns and looks down. They ask him how he can consider himself the leader of the guild after that. The bearded man clenches his fist and tries to strike, calling those standing in front of him bastards. Someone stops the blow. Richard looks at his opponent in bewilderment. Seong, holding the bastard's hand, looks him in the eyes and declares that he is one of the biggest disappointments in his life. The guild leader grabs his opponent by the torso. Then he throws him away from himself. Looking at the bearded man, Seong says that he is disappointed that he did not throw him to hell much earlier. Richard lies on the floor and growls. A smile appears on his face. He says that Seong still seems to not understand something and thinks that the person in front of him is still a C-rank weakling. Richard gets to his feet and declares that Seong will regret getting involved with a B-rank guild member. Next to the scumbag stands a man with glasses. He looks at Seong menacingly and asks why he is beating up his guild member. It is said that this is Choi Dong-hoon, the leader of Chinrima, a B-rank guild. Woo holds out his sword in front of him. He looks at it carefully. The guy feels the tip and thinks that the length of the weapon is right. Woo makes a sharp swing. He realizes that the weight also seems perfect. A notebook falls to the floor. Woo sees that it is the notebook that the Thunder Emperor gave him. The guy looks at one of the pages. His attention is drawn to the red circles on the joints of the monster's bones. Woo understands that this is a strategy guide for fighting a giant skeleton, and it seems to him that this development helped defeat the B-rank boss. Woo turns page after page and realizes that the hero had to write a step-by-step guide, and, as he assumed earlier, the guild members are most likely just shamelessly taking advantage of the generosity and kindness of the Thunder Emperor. Then his attention is drawn to the notes in the notebook. One of them says that the strategy turned out to be a failure. The hero admits that he did not take into account the power that Ho and Sik possess. The guy is amazed. We see how the mentioned characters fight the monster. The note made by Hyan says that when it seemed to him that after the failure of his strategy he should intervene. The guys began to attack again, while using a completely new strategy that they developed themselves. In front of Woo is a page of a notebook showing a man on all fours. Ho charges forward, and together with Sik they strike the skeleton's ribs. The entry states that they first distracted the boss and then simultaneously struck the core. Woo points out two more entries, the first of which states that in the end the young men defeated the B-rank boss with their own efforts. The second passage asks if this is what growth really looks like. Then Hyan states that he is curious about what will happen next, writing that everything around him is becoming more and more exciting. We see the young man's eye. He realizes that he has been misunderstanding everything. Woo looks over the notebook. Something falls behind him. The young man turns around in surprise. Choi Dong-hoon is standing over Seong. The guild leader bends over slightly and asks how Seong dared to insult a member of Chinrima. Richard, standing behind him, says that weaklings of rank C have become impudent beyond belief and think they are who knows what. Dong-hoon begins to strangle Seong. He looks angrily into the man's eyes and asks how he, the owner of a paltry rank C, dared to beat up a member of his guild. Seong, barely breathing, says that there was a small misunderstanding. A man in a suit runs up to Dong-hoon from behind. He asks him to stop and asks what is going on. The guild leader realizes that the store manager is behind him. He raises his hands and, turning to Mr. Choi Dong-hoon, declares that even a VIP client is not allowed to start a fight in a store. The bastard looks past the manager thoughtfully. He remembers that this place is run by a hunter association, and if the consequences are serious, the organization will intervene and he will be in a very bad way. Dong-hoon points his finger behind himself, where he is holding Seong by the throat, apologizes for the incident and says that it is not his fault. Since he was provoked, the bastard states that the C-rank scum dared to insult a member of his guild. Seong, trying to catch his breath, asks what Dong-hoon just said. He puts his hand on the manager's shoulder and brazenly states that if he remembers correctly, then serving VIP customers is part of the store's performance evaluation. Smiling disgustingly, Dong-hoon says that the manager probably realizes who is more important to him as a customer. A VIP client or some trash who could not rise above rank C. A drop of sweat runs down the manager's face. He hears the bastard expressing hope that this situation will be resolved wisely. The man, rubbing the back of his head, laughs and says that now he sees what happened here because he initially misunderstood everything. Ho joins the conversation. He says that they were the ones who were provoked first and reproaches the manager for not even listening to the other side of the conflict and starting to please those who are higher in rank. The manager, with a disdainful face, apologizes to the guy, but says that if he does not cooperate, then the hunting police will be called. The members of the Happy Together Guild look at the store manager in amazement. They simply cannot believe what is happening. Richard, smiling nastily, calls them idiots. He advises them to realize their place and come to terms with it. Woo comes to the scene of the incident. He says that he understands what is happening here and asks if low-ranking people should really meekly accept unfair treatment. The guy looks at his opponents with disdain and says that they are very unlucky, and they are not dealing with C-ranking people. They look at the young man in amazement. Dong-hoon asks what rank the person speaking to them is. Richard shakes his head from side to side and says that this simply cannot be, since he is sure of the rank of these bastards. He puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and asks why he is saying such absurd things. The young man firmly takes the scoundrel by the wrist. With a sharp movement, he lifts the bastard's hand and asks him to keep it to himself. Wu says that everyone will soon find out whether he is lying or not. Richard looks at his hand and thinks that the opponent is incredibly strong. Wu calmly looks at the manager and asks him to check the information about the Happy Together Guild. He says with a trembling voice that he will do it right now. Someone tells the store employee that he does not need to do that. Seong says that their guild belongs to the C rank. He bows and apologizes for this incident, after which he promises that they will do their business and calmly leave from here. Wu looks at the guild leader in bewilderment. Indignantly raising his hand, he asks why Seong is acting like this and says that putting up with such a boorish attitude is simply wrong. The young man says that he wants to help. Seong sighs heavily and tells Wu that if he helps, then everything will really be easy, but he is the only one with an S rank here and not the other 3 guild members. Wu looks at Seong, wide-eyed. He sullenly states that, of course, as with Hyan, their collaboration helps everyone grow, but he is not going to make himself look all-powerful and important at someone else's expense. Richard looks at Seong in bewilderment, who says that he finds such behavior pathetic. We see Wu's right eye. He looks down sadly, realizing that he has completely misjudged these people. Seong turns to Ho and says that they need to go. The guy agrees to do so. Wu realizes that he was deceived by the difference in ranks. Dong-hoon takes a threatening step forward and shouts for the C rank holders to quickly get out of here, promising a lot of trouble if they do. A threat appears in Wu's eyes. He kicks the villain in the knees. Grabbing Dong-hoon by the back of the head, he presses his nose to the floor. Continuing to hold the back of the opponent's head, he says that if he takes another step, he will greatly regret it. Seong tries to stop the guy, who tells the scumbag that he shouldn't threaten the guild leader in front of him. Wu says that he thinks it was right to calm the scumbag down. Wu looks at Seong questioningly and asks if he went too far with his help. Someone pulls out a knife behind the guy. It's Richard. He screams loudly, calling the opponents bastards and threatening to kill them all. Someone hits the scumbag in the chest. Seong, clenching his fists, looks at the scumbag and asks where he's going. Wu, smiling, looks at his comrade, who says that it looks like they all need each other's help. Richard, lying on the floor, calls the store manager and asks why he doesn't do anything about these scumbags. He calls for the hunting police or other decisive action. The store employee looks at the hunter in fear and asks if he's okay. Richard rises to his feet and says that he is far from well, but the manager must immediately get rid of the scum that are disgracing his establishment. It turns out that the man was asking about Wu's well-being. He bows low to him, calls him Demon Sword and apologizes for not recognizing him sooner. Richard and Dong-hoon are astonished, the latter repeating the young man's nickname. Wu looks over his shoulder and says that everything is fine, and he understands everything. The guy hits Dong-hoon on the back, and he flies forward. The guild leader and Richard look at the young man in fear, who tells the manager to make sure that these scumbags are treated as they deserve. Wu tells his guild members that they can go. Dong-hoon gets up from the floor and asks the man to wait. The scumbags kneel and beg Demon Sword to forgive them, who tells his comrades that he has already chosen a weapon for them. The young men pass by the golden statue of the Thunder Emperor. Wu looks at the sculpture. He still doesn't understand why Hyan decided to join this guild, but he already understands one thing. The boy looks up, someone calls him. Sick, rubbing the back of his head, asks the young man about the sword he chose earlier. He wants to know if it was really the sword of the legendary Ego. Seong turns to his subordinate with displeasure and demands that he stop talking nonsense and follow him. He swears with a trembling voice that he really heard a voice. Someone tells him that even Ego swords have their own standards. Sick, indignantly shaking his hand, shouts that Seong simply cannot know about this. Wu laughs happily. He thinks that this company can really be fun. A motorcyclist passes by the guild building, dropping an envelope. He shouts that the message has been delivered. The door opens. Someone looks at the envelope and thinks that it probably contains a message about the delivery of weapons. Seong examines the small black envelope. He opens it and reads the text of the message. We see the eyes of the guild leader. Seong opens his mouth and screams loudly. Hyan sits at the table in a chair. Kyung-mo tells him that the hero's texts have recently become much more interesting. The hero, smiling, thanks the editor, who says that if Hyan has ideas for a few more episodes, they can move on to the next stage. The guy, looking ahead in surprise, asks again. He presses the phone to his ear and hears Kyung-mo talking about evaluating the work before publication. Hyan is amazed. He asks again. The editor, smiling, confirms that they are talking about publication and states that since the platform they work for conducts the evaluation itself, it needs some results, but the preliminary feedback from the company representatives is very positive at the moment. We see the back of the hero's head. He says that everything is clear to him, and he will continue writing. Kyung-mo tells the guy to try hard. Hyun looks at the screen of his device. He happily clenches his fist and realizes that he is doing well. The hero looks very happy. He understands that his novella can very well become successful. The guy's hand falls on the keyboard. He understands that this is, of course, just a preliminary assessment, but still, we can say that he has achieved a huge success. The hero looks at the computer screen, thinking that he needs to seize the moment and not let up on his efforts until the very moment of publication of the work. Hyun, next to whom there is a can of energy drink, looks at the screen. We see his face up close. The hero's mood worsens. He realizes that he has not written a single word. The hero leans over the table. He realizes that he has already described everything that has happened in the guild recently, and he has nothing for the next chapter. Skyscrapers are visible above the young man's head. He thinks that it would be good if something worthy of mention happened. In front of us is a huge building. D-Han rubs his chin with his thumb. He sits at the table and says that all this is driving him crazy. The head of the Korean Hunters Association is furious. He cannot believe that the time has come again for this crazy corporate party. We see people sitting at a long table. It is reported that this is a banquet for the top 10 guilds in South Korea. 2 of the participants in the banquet clink glasses. We are given to understand that this event happens once every 2 years and representatives of the guilds gather to discuss mutual exchange. The guild leaders are desperately arguing with each other. It is reported that the banquet has recently not only completely lost its original purpose, but has also turned into a battlefield. D-Han, leaning on the table, watches the heated fights taking place at the table. In front of the head of the association is a folder with documents. The man thinks that he is the one who has to settle all the contradictions and make sure that things do not get too serious. The very thought of having to do it again disgusts him. He has no idea why the association needs to hold this event at all. In front of us are 4 emblems. D-Han thinks that in the end, the focus will still be on the 4 strongest guilds. The young man smokes a cigarette. D-Han thinks that at least this time the Happy Together Guild has appeared on the list of participants, but it is not enough. The head of the association looks at the papers. He thinks that a new guild will not be able to free him from the dominance of the top 4 guilds of Korea, which has been going on for several decades. In front of us is a list of guilds invited to the banquet. D-Han thinks that he sees the same faces, names, and ranks, and everything will certainly repeat itself again. The man realizes that there simply cannot be anything interesting for him in this event. An idea seems to occur to D-Han. We see the lower part of his face. D-Han smiles. He puts his hands on the table and thinks that this year, in fact, everything can be very interesting. D-Han gets up from the table and tells his secretary to start preparing for the banquet. The assistant stands in front of his boss and asks him what happened. As he usually hates the banquet they are about to host, D-Han replies that this time will probably be different. The document highlights the guild that is ranked 6th, Happy Together. In front of us is a skyscraper. Hwang, with his arms folded, looks out the window. He has a thoughtful expression on his face, saying that time has passed very quickly. We see a man sitting in the lotus position. In front of his face is a black sheet. He says that he has long been curious about what everyone is up to, so this is the perfect opportunity to find out. In front of us is another very colorful character. He is fingering a large rosary. He has 9 dots on his forehead. He says that it is time to see all these disgusting faces again. A man with white hair is walking along a path between huge boulders. He takes out his sword from its sheath. The young man looks thoughtfully ahead and says that he really hopes that there will be someone to test his new sword on at this banquet. There are people lying on the ground. The young man lights a cigarette and curses foully. He throws away the invitation and says that he really does not want to go to this event. The leaf falls down. The members of the Happy Together Guild look at the invitation they received. It contains all the necessary information about what this event is. Seong looks very unhappy. Sik, standing behind him, asks if they are really going to this famous banquet. Ho says that he must be dreaming. He cannot believe that they are in 6th place in the ranking of hunting guilds in South Korea. Seong grinds his teeth in rage. The man tries to understand at what point everything got out of control. He understands perfectly well that he is only a C-rank hunter, and what to do at this banquet is completely unclear to him. Ho, who can't see his boss's expression, clenches his fist and says that Seong will be sitting at the same table with the heads of the top S-rank guilds. Seong, meanwhile, imagines himself being eaten by the other members of the banquet, afraid that he will be made to pay for taking the wrong place. It seems that Seong is about to lose consciousness. The man actually falls to the floor. The invitation flies up. Ho and Sik try to resuscitate their boss. They loudly ask him to hold on. Woo, smiling, says that there is not a single quiet day in this guild. Hyun, who is sitting next to him, says that the guy should get used to it. Woo, looking away, says that, however, everything is going as it should, and Hyan will be able to get material for his novel if he goes to the banquet. The young man thoughtfully rubs his chin and says that the Thunder Emperor has probably already been to this event, although he did not have a guild at the time. Woo looks at the hero and says that it must have been a long time since he was at this event. Hyan makes a face and says that he is not going anywhere. The Thunder Emperor looks down sadly. Everyone around him greets him. The guild leaders look very pleased. One of them says that the guy has already cleared the 10th gate of the SSS rank. The second says that this achievement allows him to call the young man a real hero. In front of us are 3 other participants of the banquet. One of them says that he is shocked that the guy has achieved all this at what is essentially a student age. The second says that the young man has already become one of the legendary hunters, who are called the 12 Apostles. The guild leaders happily look at the guy and say that very soon he will become the strongest hunter in the whole world. Propping his head with his hand, Hyan sighs heavily. He is in a foul mood, asking himself what it means to be the strongest hero and why everyone around him is so excited about it. The 2 guild leaders clink glasses. One of them says that it's time to toast the prestige of the Korean hunters and the Thunder Emperor. The young man, meanwhile, is very bored. We see Hyan's profile. He waves his hand, saying that he's not going anywhere. Woo asks in surprise if this is a joke. The guy says that in that case, he'll stay here too, and his words reach Seong's ears. Woo and Hyan look at their guild leader in surprise. He stands up and asks menacingly if they really plan to skip the banquet. The young men ask in surprise when Seong managed to come to his senses. Smiling ominously, he asks why, in their opinion, their guild suddenly rose to rank as he rolls up the sleeves of his shirt and asks who is responsible for the fact that Happy Together ended up in 6th place in the ranking of Korean hunter guilds. Hyan puts his hands in front of him and says that he is very busy. Gritting his teeth in rage, Seong looks at his subordinates and says that this is not a reason to skip the banquet. Bearing surprisingly healthy teeth, the man says that he will ask the guys again if they are going to the event. Woo and Hyan, trembling with fear, hug and shout in one voice that they will definitely go to the banquet. Seong, still blazing with anger, turns away from them and declares that it was the right choice. The young people tell each other that they were really scared, and the man has a very bad aura. Hyan puts his head on the back of the chair and thinks that all this brings back very unpleasant memories. Wearily closing his eyes, Hyan thinks that, nevertheless, he has no choice, and if it came down to this, then he will, well, go there to get inspiration for his novel. In front of us is a staircase with a red carpet. Dehan greets one of the guests and declares that he hopes for fruitful cooperation next year, and the other one replies that this hope is mutual. Dehan wipes the sweat from his face. He thinks that all the ranked guilds have already entered the building, and only those who are one step higher remain. Many photographers are clicking their shutters. Someone is shouting loudly that the S-ranked guilds are arriving. 2 hunters are walking along the red carpet. Dehan looks down in displeasure. He thinks that if he just mentions devils, they will appear. We see hunters in white robes and yellow capes. It is reported that in front of us is Parthenon, the guild that ranks second. The next group of hunters is led by a bald man with 9 dots on his forehead. It is reported that he is the leader of the 9 Dragons Guild, which ranks 4th. In front of us, in a white jacket, is the next guild leader. It is reported that he represents Limitless, which ranks 3rd. The next guys on the red carpet are guys in black suits. They represent the non-target guild, which ranks 5th. There are 2 photographers in front of us. One of them says that the guilds that have just passed create a really special atmosphere around themselves. The second one starts talking about how influential and strong they are in relation to each other. On the carpet, the legs of the members of the next guild are visible. We see the backs of these people. The procession is led by Hwang. It is reported that he is the leader of the Guardians, the most powerful guild in Korea. We see the faces of the characters we already know. The female reporter standing next to the photographer says that this is simply unbelievable, and in this guild there are 4 S-rank hunters. Her colleague says that therefore it is not surprising that they are called the kings of the hunting world in South Korea. A white car suddenly stops in front of the reporters. Seong hits Sik on the back and tells him that he should have been the one driving. The guy replies that he recently got his driver's license and therefore wanted to try his hand at driving. Rubbing the back of his head, Ho says that the main characters always arrive last. Seong, who is incredibly angry, sarcastically thanks his subordinate for just making him the main character. The guild leader looks at something in surprise. The reporters look at the guild members with their mouths wide open. The guys in white suits look at the new arrivals with displeasure. Seong looks at Ho in amazement and asks why everyone is looking at them like that. Are they really too late? He says with a trembling voice that it is definitely not because they were mistaken for the main characters. 2 hunters look at the guild members walking down the red carpet. One of them says that it has been a long time since he has seen anything funnier. The other asks if this is really a new S-rank guild. It turns out that the guild leaders are talking. The one in the white robe asks if these people are acting braver or crazier. The hunters in white suits look at them with disapproval. One of them says that the Guardians have held the first place for 50 years, and their pride has grown accordingly during this time. Someone reminds that this is an official event and the first banquet in 2 years. Seong, Ho and Sik look at someone with fear. One of the spectators says that by arriving last and taking away the attention that should have been given to the Guardians, the members of this guild, in fact, declared war on the number 1 ranking. Hwang, meanwhile, smiles. The guild leaders look at him in confusion. The one in the white robe asks if the War Emperor is laughing. His colleague says that he may have softened with age, but he is still not the type of person to forgive such things. One of them notices that Hwang is looking at someone and then asks who it could be. It becomes clear that the old man is looking at either Hyan or Wu. The latter of the mentioned guys looks to his left. Someone realizes that it is the demon sword. The guild leader in the white robe looks at the guy in confusion and seems to understand what is going on here. Wu is standing on the path with his hand in his pocket. The guild master is thinking that every S-rank hunter is an incredibly valuable asset, and any one of them is capable of shifting the balance of power one way or another. And this is especially true for Demon Sword, a genius who reached S-rank in just 2 years. The man understands that every guild would like to have this hunter. The man is thoughtfully rubbing his chin. He knows that the guy refused all the guilds that invited him to join their ranks, but this was just an official explanation. In front of us is Hwang and Wu. The hunter dressed in a white robe is thinking that if there is some kind of personal connection between these two people, it can ruin all his plans. The guild masters look very unhappy. Hwang, on the contrary, is smiling. He thinks that an unexpected thing happened, and Hyan came to the banquet. For some reason, the old man thought that he found this event extremely tiring. Hyan is standing next to Wu. A guy in a black robe looks at them from the balcony above. He also understands that the demonic sword is in front of him. The guild leader looks at the guy carefully. He thinks that this is indeed a genius, but he has not yet reached the ceiling of his capabilities and, apparently, cannot yet fight him on equal terms. Someone calls out to his master. The guild leader's assistant, hearing the question of what he needs, asks who this person is. The blonde explains that this is the demonic sword, and the guy does not need to worry about it. He is incredibly strong for his age, but harmoniously developing. The assistant of the leader will soon catch up with him. He declares that he is not worried about the demonic sword at all. The guy points his finger at the hero and asks who it is. The blonde looks closely at the young man. His assistant, sighing heavily, says that he feels incredible power emanating from this young man. A bluish glow is visible around Hyan. The young man who paid attention to it states that even if everyone present here attacks him, they will not have a single chance to survive. That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.